call this meeting to order and start with our first item of business, which I believe is being presented, or maybe I should say is introduced by Dr. Priestley, and then we have presenters.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Bogus. We're going to, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone. There's so many faces I haven't seen, and in a rush to get things started. I know we're a few days in, but there are a lot of new faces and ones I haven't been able to encounter in 2022. So first I want to say Happy New Year. It's great to see everyone. Welcome to the first curriculum committee of the new year. And we are going to kick it off today with a presentation on a literacy resolution. Reading is critical to lifelong success. We will have a presentation. This is a follow-up to a presentation that was presented by staff who presented an analysis in December to the literacy resolution. And today we have a presentation by authors of the resolution, Alita Fisher and Brittany O'Connor. And I will turn it over to them for them to share. Alita and Brittany, you all can go.
Thank you very much. Moving things around to find the unmute button. So first of all, thank you very much, commissioners. Thank you, district staff. We really want to recognize that these past 2 weeks have been really tough on everyone. And the fact that still with everything going on at school sites, you've prioritized being here and you've given us space to discuss this. We're grateful. And so thank you for that. So we're here to discuss reading is critical to lifelong success. Next slide, please. So the point of this resolution, this resolution has come from a lot of collaboration and discussion with a whole lot of various stakeholders. And the whole point of this resolution is to bring a lot of disparate voices. There's a lot of work we recognize that's going on in our district around reading instruction and really formalizing it, as we've seen done with other many other events throughout the past couple years, making sure that resolutions memorialize the good work that's already being done. So in particularly, what we wanted to focus on is talking about how we can improve our literacy proficiency among our SFUSD students. How can we address the disparity between student group outcomes? How can we keep kids in gen ed classrooms, learning in gen ed classrooms, and preventing referral to tier 2 and tier 3 interventions? And identify we've got a lot of over identification and over referrals to special education. So those are some of the problems that a lot of us have been seeing that we wanted to formalize a group to really action and get to work on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Brittany O'Connor for the next slide.
Hi, I'm Brittany O'Connor. I'm a school psychologist for the district. I work at James Lick Middle School. What is the science of reading? Well, the act of reading is all these different things that we see here. It's background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, and then also we have things like word recognition, which are phonological awareness and decoding and sight recognition. And all these skills need to be taught together. So first discretely and then together. These components are an entire neurological, psychological, and linguistic process behind how the brain learns to read. And so currently, we don't have a district policy or curriculums at all sites that address all components of how children learn to read. And when we are missing word recognition components, then it is not a functioning rote. And so that's one of the concerns that we have. Next slide. So the ladder of reading and writing, we don't see this as a war, but rather research being implemented. Evidence for more than 20 years has shown that children predominantly learn first from letter sound correspondence. Next slide. Why now? We like this quote, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. All right, next slide, please. So another reason, why now? When we're working with our data, we see things like only less than 50% of our students are proficient. And then when you really, in reading, and when you really break it down, when you're looking at something like the reading inventory, which is where our secondary students are often measured starting in middle school and high school for their reading levels, you really see these disparities between our white students compared to our Black and Latinx students. And it's really, really concerning for us. And so we want to make sure that we continue as a district to highlight this disparity and actually address it. And one of the things that we think can help is the resolution, so we can all work together and versus being in our silos. And next slide. So structured literacy in Tier 1 is student-centered in our perspective. We really, really believe if there is all the components of reading being taught in the Tier 1, then we'll be able to catch some of these students who end up needing Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions sooner, through all of the great education that the teachers are already doing. We just hope that that it gets caught sooner. Okay, so next slide. Alita.
Yes, thank you. So we wanted to point out, we're hearing a lot. Many of us who have been involved in this resolution have been on a bit of a listening tour for the past couple of months. And a lot of people have asked for why should we do this now? Who's doing it well? And surprisingly, Mississippi. No one thinks of Mississippi. Well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't be a California snob, but not many people that I've talked to would think of Mississippi as being a model that we should look to, and are surprised when it gets brought up. But Mississippi has changed the way teachers are taught to teach reading in college. They've implemented all the strands of structured literacy in their early reading programs, and they're seeing great outcomes, not just in one focal population, but amongst entire focal populations. And the reason why Mississippi is such an interesting case study is because in most school districts, you are talking, especially public education in Mississippi, you're talking about students who do not have the access outside of their public schools to tutoring, to other independent programs. And so this really is something that that highlights what a change in instructional practices in public schools can do. Also, we wanted to point out that just buying a brand new curriculum or just supplementing our current curriculum with new components, that in and of itself isn't going to drive change. It's been tried, and it's made many people very skeptical. There was a study back in 2002 that actually highlighted this, that if you attend a one-day webinar, seminar, or whatever, even a week-long seminar as a teacher, there's actually very little of that you're going to be able to bring back to your classroom to implement instructional change. What really impacts the most change is ongoing coaching, ongoing professional development. And we know that's true. We've got professional learning communities at many of our schools or across schools. We've got our instructional leadership teams. We've got TLE. We see the value of continued professional development. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've heard loud and clear, and all of us who have worked on this resolution see very regularly, is that there is a lot of duplication in our district, and there is a lot of great work happening. That was one of the points that was made in the analysis last month, is there's a whole lot of duplication. And that's very true. And that's exactly what this slide is meant to highlight. We've got we did a phonological pilot processing program many years ago under our last chief academic officer. Like I said, we have school site PLCs. We've got the CSACE committee that's working on over identification for students to specific special education eligibility categories. We've got literacy coaches, we've got RTIFs, we've got folks who are working on this. We've got teachers out there buying their own curriculum, right? We've got parent groups who've been talking about reading instruction for years, like the CAC. So the main point of this resolution is that whereas clause about the literacy instruction working group. Instead of all this work happening in silos, we want to bring it all together. We want all of us to actually start talking and working together. We can't get past duplication until we get to collaboration. Until we're talking together, we're all working on the same thing. No one in this district is happy with less than 50% of our students being proficient readers. We all want to get to 100. Otherwise, you wouldn't be toiling through, you educators wouldn't be toiling through everything you're toiling through right now in the middle of this pandemic and still working for SFUSD. This is not about blaming or shaming. This is about having us all working together on the same page. It's not about a war, it's about collaboration. So we're hoping we can all, paint on the same messy canvas together. Hence this analogy. So having said that, next slide, please. Part of the rest of our listening tour has been that, the resolution as it's written is a little bit problematic. And so talking about intent versus impact, all of us authors and collaborators recognize that we have to move past our intent and get to impact. So we're willing to work with any stakeholders. And in fact, we are proposing a few amendments here. We'd like to see we'd like to see more emphasis in the whereas clauses about all the work that is being done in the district. I mean, I don't think the CNI folks get enough credit for the work that's being done around institutional racism and making our curriculum more culturally relevant. We'd like to change the dates to make them more reasonable and feasible. We realized that in the instructional working group, the literacy instruction working group, we did not include special ed. As the advocacy chair of the CAC, that's definitely want to see that updated. And at the end, there was, we've got a clause about working on math and writing as well, and social emotional interventions. A lot of people have pointed out that scope creep. So if that goes, that would be a good thing too. The resolution as it's written actually doesn't specifically say that we need to buy a new curriculum. It says it says we should review. There have been some comments about fear of moving to a new curriculum. And so we think that this could be a really good opportunity for us to review our current curriculum, compare and benchmark against what others are doing. But nowhere in the resolution does it say throw out F&P. Nowhere in the resolution does it say throw out the units of study or Lucy Calkins. Many of us do have strong feelings about that. I'm not gonna deny that. But you know what? We get past it being a war and we get to the point of collaboration if we sit in a room and we actually discuss it and talk through it. So that's what we're asking. So next slide, please. So thank you all very much for your time. We appreciate it. We do have one clarifying question. So we have noticed, we working on this resolution, and it's been brought up in previous meetings. In order to comply with Brown Act, there are the way that things are noticed on meeting on board docs is changing a little bit. The three of us who were supposed to present today were listed. One of Megan is sick, as I mentioned. Our names specifically are listed here, but no other presentation today or for the rest of the week, anything moving forward that we've seen yet has people named. I don't mind having my name out there, but it really does feel like we're being held to a different standard here to have our names listed and everyone else be just more generic. And frankly, with Megan being sick today, it would have helped us to not be listed specifically if we could have offered an alternate in her place. So moving forward, I think that's something to think about in how we notice meetings and how we put the agendas together. And that's my last point. That's not really related to this, but thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation. Is there any additional comments before we go to staff, before we go to public comment from the authors in addition to the presentation? If not, we can let staff just share their recommendations and then we can move forward. Okay, yeah, so if staff would just share their recommendations again on the recommendation, and then I think we can go to public comment.
So Commissioner Bogus, I don't know if we have a recommendation per se. I think I would lift up the areas that, first of all, I want to say there's a lot we agree on. So I'm going to start with that. I think there's a lot we agree on. I'm having met with Alita and Brittany and others, co-authors. We are all committed to 100% of our students reading. So I want to say that. And I think we are also open to, a lot of collaboration. We want more collaboration. We do have a lot of partners, and we're open to even more collaboration. And I think that's part and parcel of what is being asked here. So I want to lift that up and appreciate that. I will say points that, just to reiterate, points that highlighted for staff that we presented last month and continue. Questions we might have would be around structured literacy and being really specific about what that might look like as an option, as one of several options. We know kids learn differently, and we know structured literacy is named in the resolution. And so thinking about how we can have various options for students to meet their individual needs. So specifically calling out the structured literacy piece, making sure that's not the only option for kids, but one of several options that might be available to students. Also, the role of the working group, that the committee in the group, and being really clear about the role of the committee as an advisory role or a role that may review. Is that a short-term, a long-term committee, and the scope of work, naming that work very clearly. And also just being clear, although a new curriculum is not what's being called for, and I appreciate that clarification. Are there budget implications at a time when we would be reviewing for a new curriculum, which might not be for several years, but we do continue to acquire supplemental materials, provide professional development in various areas? Are there any other pieces to this that might have some budgetary implications? So those are areas that we would lift up, for clarification in the resolution, but also want to name there are just many areas that we agree on as well.
Thank you for that. And I think with that, we will go to public comment.
Okay. If you would like to speak onto this item, can you please raise your hand, and can I have that translated into Chinese and Spanish?
Si desea hacer un comentario acerca de este tema, por favor, levante la mano. Gracias.
而家係我哋嘅公眾發表意見嘅環節。如果你哋有想發表意見嘅，請舉手。多謝你。Thank you.
Scene 7, Commissioner.
Okay, why don't we give people up to 2 minutes and we will start public comment.
Okay. Rebecca?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Fedorgo. I'm a special education RSP at Sutro Elementary School. I'm also one of the co-authors of this resolution, but we felt my voice was best heard in public comment. I would love to respond to kind of what Dr. Priestley said at the end regarding budget implications. I think the continued usage of Fontes and Pinnell and Readers and Writers Workshop by Lucy Calkins has enormous budget implications for SFUSD. We're seeing other districts across the Bay in Berkeley Unified being sued over their usage of these curricula. So it follows that we spend millions of dollars per year paying for students to go to charters, to private schools, to see additional practitioners outside of our district because we use these curricula. So I think they have huge, enormous budget implications because we're currently not using a curricula that has any efficacy for showing that it works for the most students. It doesn't. There's no district in this country that uses F&P, Readers and Writers Workshop, and has above an 80% literacy rate. There is none. That does not happen. So I think that has huge budget implications. We will need to purchase additional materials. And in addition, watching a teacher try and set up these libraries through that curricula is insanely time consuming. My teachers need 2 days off to assess. I need 45 minutes to do assessments for different curricula that I utilize. So it has an implication for time, for money, and for the amount of space it can take up in a classroom if you've ever used it. I do want to just say, like, at my site, it's been really frustrating. Like, I spent $1,000 last week on additional curricula for my kids, stuff that works isn't working for them. I don't want to spend my budget on that. I want to buy sensory stuff. You know, I can't help my kids with autism as much because I got to spend a lot of time on this. And that's not fair.
Tara?
Hi, my name's Tara. I'm a parent and an educator in SFUSD. And I just want to say that I'm really excited that the group did get to present today. So thank you very much for helping make that happen. Everyone who helped make that happen. I helped work on this resolution with educators and parents and community members. So I think that, the more we move this forward with the spirit of collaboration and student success as our guiding parts. I think that's what the spirit of this resolution is, right? We want our kids, our students, all to be have better access and for us all to work together, right? And I think about this as like a kid with an IEP, that if all his providers are on the same page, that's going to help him, right? And I think that about that as myself as a service provider for students with learning needs, that if we all collaborate across the grades and across the continuum of the tiers, right? Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, that helps our students. And so I really hope that we could think about that when we're thinking about the good parts and the bad parts of this resolution. Like, we can keep adjusting it as it moves forward, but I do hope it moves forward because I think that's our main goal, right? Is all of our student success. So thank you very much. I appreciate y'all.
Christina?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Christina Scher. I'm the CAC Vice Chair and also the parent of a child who experienced her first learning success using the structured literacy approach. I support this resolution. I think it's going to have a really great impact on me, that I'm going to see decodable readers in the classroom, which is, that's the kind of thing that really benefits my daughter and helps her like build confidence and make progress. And I'm so excited. It sounds like that's coming. This has been such a charged topic. I just want to say that I really am grateful to have the opportunity to hear from the authors of the literacy resolution. And I really admire the spirit of collaboration that they're bringing to this charged topic. It's not really I don't always have that. So I just am amazed and full of admiration. And I'm really, really encouraged at the collaboration and the spirit I see here today. I think that with all these really thoughtful, smart partners, we can really get something done. Thank you.
Megan?
Hi, this is Megan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name's Megan Potente, and I am calling in today to say that we really need this working group that's proposed in the resolution, because we have to get early reading right. We need to come together as stakeholders, and we're all invested in this. I'm a former educator with roughly 20 years of experience as a first grade teacher and a fourth grade teacher, a reading specialist, and some other roles. And I've seen the curriculum changes over the years that we've heard other educators speak about, but I take issue with the characterization of the efforts put forth in this resolution as a swing of the pendulum. The reality is that early literacy instruction is just not treated with the urgency needed. And there's an immense body of evidence that should inform our practices. So not too many years ago, it was my job to support schools and teachers in implementing SFUSD's comprehensive approach to literacy. And I promoted the components of the framework. I helped teachers plan with Lucy Calkins and F&P. And I coached teachers using the methods, surrounding cueing and MSV. But at a certain point, I just was not able to do that any longer. And that's because my son has dyslexia, and he was failed by these very methods that I was supposed to be helping teachers understand and use in their classrooms. So just like the many children I knew who struggled with reading in SFUSD schools where I worked, this way of teaching did not work for my own son. And we had the resources to access structured literacy at a private school, and he can now read and write at grade level. But many kids are dependent on school to learn to read. And Lucy Calkins and F&P, those approaches drastically fail them. So, I'm supporting this working group. It's so important that we come together and make this happen. Thank you to everyone who's worked so hard on this.
Hava?
Hi, my name is Hava, and I am a parent of a struggling reader who has dyslexia as well as probably dysgraphia, struggled with writing as well. I'd like to just say a couple things. The first is, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to reach all 100% teaching the exact same way, but the key is reaching the majority, as many as humanly possible. And right now, that is not happening. So at the bare minimum, we need to consider change. The second thing is, when we talk about the budget, I understand. I am a realistic human being and I have to pay my bills too, but we can't afford not to. The impact to students like my son and to me watching it is too much. We cannot afford not to. We have to find a way forward to bring these numbers up, to help children that are not only struggling to learn how to read and write, but are also suffering mentally. They are frustrated. They feel like they are less than. It cannot continue. We have to find a way to collaborate and move forward and not be afraid of that movement and change. The other thing is, I'm interested in the audit being expanded. We have K through 2. If you're not comfortable right now with things like structured literacy or which curriculum is correct or how to go about it, at the bare minimum, we need to know what is happening on the ground, and not just K through 2, K through 5, 6 through 8. Students are on many different levels and they have fallen between the cracks in many different grades, as well as there is so little data on tier 2. What is happening there? I don't know. What is happening with tier 3? We need an audit. We need to evaluate and we need to know how to move forward. Beyond that, I just want to thank you. I support this resolution. Please consider it. We need to find a way forward. Thank you.
Speaker with the 528-224-3803 phone number. Is there a speaker with the phone number of 528-224-3803?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, my name is Rex Ridgway, and I am in 100% support of getting this resolution voted on and approved and moving forward. And my public comments will be reduced just to statistics. At Betsy Carmichael, 33% of the kids read at grade level. Bret Hart, only 8% of the kids read at grade level. Horace Mann, only 33% kids read at grade level. Chavez, only 21% read at grade level. Cleveland, only 13% read at grade level. Charles Drew, only 19% read at grade level. Carver, only 16% read at grade level. MLK, only 35% read at grade level. El Dorado Elementary, only 11% read at grade level. Guadalupe, only 36% read at grade level. Malcolm X, only 23% read at grade level. At Chavez, only 18% read at grade level. So just looking at the statistics alone, anybody who would fly in from the moon would say something has to change. So I just want to put those statistics there. Everybody else has done well in describing the overall thing, but when you look at the statistics, my question is, it's not working. Thank you.
Sam?
Hiya. My name is Sam. I'm a member of the CAC. I'm a mother of a child who is diagnosed with dyslexia, amongst other things. And I have dyslexia myself. And I just want to talk a little bit about that my daughter is finally gotten exposure to structural literacy this year, 2nd grade, and has improved her reading a lot. And I don't think we can really measure the impact that that makes on everything. And the whole idea that every child could have access to structural literacy, there are many children with dyslexia that's all they need. They just need that little push. And then they wouldn't even have to go into SPED. Oh my goodness, like what that would save us in everything, in money, time, emotion. And as Hava said, the frustration. And as a mother who has dyslexia and was never able to get access to structural literacy, I see what my daughter knows now, like how to deconstruct a word. I cannot tell you how difficult public speaking is for me. And when I hit a word that I don't know, I have zero attack for it. And my daughter, who's 7, will have that. That's incredible. Please let every child have access to that. I'm so upset to see children being diagnosed with emotional disturbances and things like that when maybe they just have a hard time reading and they don't understand what's going on in the classroom. The implications are just immeasurable. And I'm sorry, I'm getting quite emotional and I didn't expect that. So yes, I'm in support of this resolution, and I just want to express my deepest gratitude to everybody on this meeting and how much you care about students and how difficult it is during this pandemic right now. And I know you all really, thank you.
El Trudeau.
Hi, I think so many great things have been said today. I just want to voice my support for the resolution. I'm a parent of a dyslexic child, also have a dyslexic husband. And I think one of the things really to point out too, to make sure it's not got lost in the shuffle, as I'm sure you all know, that reading and how quickly someone picks up reading has nothing to do with intelligence or their ability to perform in academic settings. And so when a kid struggles, if you haven't struggled, teachers included, myself included, you assume if a child struggles to read that it is actually a more profound issue, and it isn't. And this is particularly pernicious because when we're talking about reading, we're talking about access to all other learning. Once we get out of the very early grades, the ability to learn every other subject is really determined and limited by a child's ability to access written language unless they're on some alternative path. So I want to make sure we're really pointing that out, that we are limiting all of our students' progress if we are not giving the best access to the curriculum that works for most. I can also want to point out that this change is really hard, and I really love the tone that this group is coming together with, because it is money, but it's also very emotional. And I can say that every single teacher that my child has interacted with in SFUSD really wanted her to succeed, was very emotionally invested in that happening, and came into teaching because they wanted to help kids. However, there was only one person who really had the skills to help her. And the challenge was, when asking for help, often that's interpreted as somebody saying that they are failing your child. And that's not what anybody is saying. It's just that nobody's been trained to be able to deliver those services, except for that one RSP who really had the background in structured literacy. And when she got that support, her anxiety changed and everything improved.
Jennifer?
Hello, I'm a parent of an SFUSD student, and I'm a former special ed teacher and educator in SFUSD. And I'm calling in support of this resolution. My main expertise are actually in math education, but I have some amazing colleagues who have taught me about structured literacy. And even though it might not seem obvious, I see a lot of similarities between structured literacy and teaching math conceptually. In math, I think most of us on this call would agree that children shouldn't be expected to memorize math facts in isolation, but rather they should understand relationships and patterns between numbers. And I see structured literacy in a really similar way. Learning math facts are, of course, not the only part of math, but they make all of math much more attainable. And structured literacy and learning to read is very similar to that. So thank you to everybody who's been working on this, and thank you for listening.
Douglas?
Yeah, hi, this is Doug Rich. I'm an RTIP at McKinley and a parent of 2 boys with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So as we like to say in our household, you 2 are triple threats. And they have, we've maneuvered through the system for, one is in post-high school program and one is a senior. And it's been, it's been rough, but, because we've been able to get them the services, we've been able to sort of, muscle through things, but it hasn't been easy. The other thing I wanted to say, because I pretty much echo everything that all the parents and everyone here is saying. I also get very emotional, and I'm not one to either mince words or also be out of a loss for words. But when it comes time to talk about my own boys in this process, I get very emotional. I wanted to liken the one thing that I did want to bring up is, the talk about, well, we're kind of already doing all of this stuff, and the sort of rebranding of, balanced literacy into comprehensive literacy. But I liken it to sort of like a recipe. And, we need to have the right ingredients. And if at the core of comprehensive literacy is, some programs and approaches that have been shown not to work very well for the students we say we want to help, it's like salt. It's like having the cup of salt. It's like mixing up the sugar and the salt. So you put a cup of salt instead of 2 teaspoons of salt in the recipe. And no matter what you add to that cake recipe, because I'm all about desserts and cake, you're not going to be able to make that recipe, that cake taste good. It's not going to come out right. So I just keep going back to that, that cake recipe, and we need to have the right ingredients. And so, I've seen as an RTIF, as a teacher, as an RTIF, I've worked with kids with dyslexia for about 18 years now. We need to think about that. Thank you.
That's it, Commissioner.
Thank you so much to everyone for their public comment. So I think now we'll go to comments from commissioners. I did just want to address one thing from the presenters. To my understanding of kind of what was explained to me in regards to who was able to present today and who was not, it was really based on who was listed in the agenda. And because we had listed you as individuals and not listed you as a group, it limited the ability for folks to come in and out. And some of that is because typically it's district staff who are presenting and they don't have to put their names, but when people who aren't directly a part of the district are presenting, I think that we typically try to put down the name of them or the group. But I can follow up too if there is more that I can kind of illuminate around that or kind of give more clarity or help address it in the future too. And so with that, why don't we go to the commissioners who have their hands raised. So why don't we have Commissioner Collins, President Lopez, and Commissioner Alexander, maybe in that order, Co.
Thank you very much. And I want to say, just share my deep appreciation for presenters today who are volunteers, really, and consistently, not just now, but have been working to improve our district. And the fact that you're offering ideas and new ways of looking at things and willing to kind of put yourselves out there is just really, I really respect that and appreciate that and look to learn from you. And I also wanted to say thank you to Nicole and your team for kind of being open to these conversations and bringing your team with your ideas. I just think ultimately, I think what people have been mentioning, like this is the way that we need to move forward, is we need to find a way to kind of get on the same page and work together, both across the district, central and sites, and then also, special education. And we have, the humanities team, and administrators and teachers and parents, right? So I think we're already kind of modeling what we want to see, which is that collaborative questioning, curiosity, and problem solving. I just wanted to lift up, I am not an expert on early reading. I want to name that. And I really do think that the folks that are experts, and there are many of them in this space, they should be leading this work. I see my role as a commissioner and as a community organizer and as a parent to really support that process happening. And so I really want you to call on me if there's anything that I can do to support that. And I just want to lift up some of the things that I heard that I think are important. I heard that there's confusion around what's happening in tier 2 and tier 3, and that was consistent, I think, in both meetings. And I'm not clear. So what are we doing? The question of what is happening, what isn't happening, what's happening in some places, but not across the district. I think there's some opportunity there for us to look at, when we're assessing, we talk about assessing students, but also just assessing what is actually happening. Because no matter what we do, if we don't do it with fidelity, we're not going to get results across the board, right? And so really understanding what is currently going on, and what's working, and how to support that. I think no matter what program we want to adopt, or if we want to keep with the program we're doing, we're going to do better if we know, what's going on in the classroom. I also, really want to push back on anyone, these ideas of the budget. I think what's frustrating for me is, yes, we are in a budget crisis. We want to be fiscally responsible. That's always the case. It's terrible now. It's worse now. And it's very important to be conscious of our resources. But if we're spending money on stuff that's not working, we don't want to keep doing that. And this is a curriculum committee. It's not a budget committee. And I do feel a little frustrated when we kind of circumvent conversations by starting about a budget before we talk about what we want and what we need for our kids. And I know as a parent, I want anything and everything my kids need to thrive and do well. And I want that for every child. And I recognize I can't afford everything, but I want to start with, a reasonable vision, and then figure out, what's practical and makes sense. And that's why we go to the curriculum committee and have conversations about programs before we go to budget. And so we should keep budget in mind, but I don't want to, cut us off I don't want to cut off the conversation that we should be having just because of, just this kind of blanket budget talk. I would love to have a robust conversation in the budget committee, that's what that's for. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also want to just really recognize some of the things that I heard that I just really appreciated. This idea that I'm learning, we often assume that lack of decoding skill is lack of cognitive ability. I think I've been guilty of that as a teacher at the high school level. Just even working on that in our district would have huge impacts. When parents and students ask for help, sometimes it's interpreted as criticism. That's also something that we need to work on as a district. And then this idea of learning patterns is important. This idea that reading can also be something, it's not just osmosis. People think that math is sequential and it's not abstract, or it's not about problem solving, and that reading is about problem solving, but it's not linear in some way, or there isn't a progression. And I guess I'm starting to question, maybe there's patterns in reading, and maybe there's also more creative ways to approach math, right? Like we should maybe be more flexible in the ways that we look at how students learn to read. And maybe there are benefits to having more systematic approach. And then finally, I really appreciated the commenter who talked about the recipe. I really like that. And it made me wonder I think there could be an opportunity to do with a working group to really assess what are we doing and where are students at, which we should be doing anyway. And the question I would have is, what should we keep doing or do more of? And what do we want to stop doing? I think that's a really important question. And then finally, with the Brown Act, this idea that we need to name people for them to present, to me, it sounds ridiculous. Either we were breaking the law beforehand because this has never been a practice, or we're not, like this name, you have to have a name in order to present, is made up. I mean, parent advisory groups regularly present. They've done that for, I think, decades. And we just put parent advisory group and then the parents, they speak. So I don't understand why any of the presenters that we've seen today, they're all parent volunteers on the parent advisory group, and there's staff also that's represented. So I'd love for staff to clarify, were we not following the rules before, or is this kind of, so thank you, Commissioner Bogus, for following up on that, because this isn't just coming up in the curriculum and instruction committee. It also came up, the PFCAC also was bumped off of an agenda for quote Brown Act reasons. And I really value when we have our parent volunteers and our educator volunteers, and they can speak as a panel with the expertise that they have and engage in discussion with us. So thank you.
Dr. Priestley, do you think you could see if we have someone from our legal counsel who could address the concerns brought up by Commissioner Collins while we go to the next commissioner's comments? Thank you.
I will check on that.
Great, thank you. And
Angie, I saw you just popped in. I don't want to cut off Commissioner Lopez, but if you, it might be the appropriate time to chime in.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Of course. That was
Okay.
one of my questions too.
Sure. Well, the board has been given advice in writing about why we're agendizing when community groups speak. It was not a requirement that individuals' names be given. That's what was done here, but the option was describe the group who's going to speak. It could have been the name of a group.
That's helpful, thank you.
That is, and it's one of the points I wanted to touch on as well. I won't repeat what's been said because I do agree with much of my colleagues, but in these areas where we're really trying to be more detailed and open and public about the information we're sharing and who it's coming from, but also not want to alarm folks who are presenting in creating rules that might seem more arbitrary than need be. I really want to make sure we continue these practices and consistency, and then really double check that we're doing things correctly. One other thing I wanted to follow up on was the amendments brought up during the presentation. And I also really do just appreciate the presenters tonight, the public commenters, the patience that everyone has shown throughout this process, given the understanding that we do all want the same outcomes for our students, and we do all want to work together, and we have shown to collaborate throughout this process. So it's clear that that will continue if we move forward with the resolution. I want to make sure that what was named in the amendments that you all provided today is followed up on as a co-author. And I'm wondering how we can move forward with that so that when we do bring it back to the full board, that language is included. So Commissioner Collins, you and I might have to follow up, or we'll check in with Dr. Priestley. But I also appreciate the shift in that language, noting what everyone has done so far that maybe wasn't noticed before. And I also wanted to note that clarification on curriculum, that it didn't convey we were rushing into a new one or dropping an old one. It was really this understanding, this idea that we will get to review what is being used is the spirit of this work. So thank you everyone for holding on to this and continuing to move it forward. It looks like we'll be stepping into a group of people who are really passionate and working towards the same goal.
Thank you, President Lopez. Commissioner Alexander.
Thank you. Like others, I really want to express my gratitude to the presenters, especially I see Alita Fisher still here. I don't know if the others are still, but I just wanted to really say thank you. I'm glad we worked out the difficulties around agendizing. I think it's really important that we are able to, oh, hi, Brittany, thank you. Yes, you too. I think it's really important that we create space for diverse voices in these committee hearings. And you know, these are also district staff and parents. So whatever we need to do to agendize it properly. But I think I'm just grateful that we're able to do it. And I also really, really appreciate the spirit of collaboration moving forward on this resolution. I guess I would love to get some clarity as to sort of next steps and process, because I think, well, and my other gratitude was to you, Dr. Priestley, and for your leadership in general around this, and then your collaboration with these groups. But I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your thoughts. I mean, because there may be other changes I think that you were thinking of. I had some questions. I'm just curious, like, what are next steps in terms of arriving on language that everybody is happy with?
So I would defer to legal in terms of process. I'm not sure I've been in this space before, but we need to make clarifications. Happy to, and I'm not knowing what the recommendation will be going forward, but I think in terms of it being presented, whether it's at another committee budget or if it goes back to the board, that amendments would be made prior to either one of those times.
May I make a proposal based on just the process? Okay, so I know President Lopez and I made a resolution for the COVID recovery, and that did go through some revisions along the way. We got feedback in the original committee that we were in, and then we incorporated some changes, and then we ended up meeting with the superintendent, and then we're able to kind of incorporate everything that we had heard through the two committees, but with the understanding that we would all be in agreement. Kind of, that's how we were able to say, okay, if it doesn't come back to one of the committees, then the agreement was that we would present something that we all both the superintendent, President Lopez, and I all agreed to before bringing it to the full board. So I'm not suggesting that that's the way we do it, but I think the key kind of decision makers that we've been working with as far as staff goes is Dr. Priestley. And I also do think Jean Robertson, you know, she's we've got these two houses that were kind of are involved in this work. And I don't know, but I think if the parties involved, that are in drafting the resolution could, those folks could be defined, and if they could agree to collaborate to present something that was mutually agreeable, then I don't think it would have to come back. But if that can't happen, then I don't know, what folks would recommend.
That sounds good to me. And I guess, I don't know, Dr. Priestley, what you think, but what I was going to say is, as a committee member, I would be having, I think, I'm not sure exactly the right way to say this, but I think Dr. Priestley and I are kind of on the same page around this stuff. So if she's okay with it, I'm okay with it. Kind of is sort of where I'm at. So I don't want to overly complicate things. I'm happy to participate if it's helpful, but I think we've just, in terms of the issues that I had raised around literacy instruction, I would sort of defer to her judgment on this. So
I think having us work through some of the changes and making some amendments would be, I think, a good next step. And prior to it being presented again, and I'm happy to make time to make that possible sooner rather than later.
So I don't think, so in my view, it doesn't need to, I mean, I would defer to the chair, but like in my view, I wouldn't then need it to come back to the committee, if that is what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So, sorry.
Yeah, I would just agree. I think it doesn't need to come back to this committee, depending on kind of what we feel like needs to happen next. I would love to kind of talk about kind of collectively where we feel like it should go. But maybe I'll save that until after we've kind of all have given comment. Is there any more comment that you have, Commissioner Alexander, that you wanted to offer up?
No, I'm happy to. I mean, I don't want to be, I don't remember exactly what I've said in this public forum, and so I'm happy to answer. Like if there's a need to discuss it more, I want to be transparent about my views on it. I think I've raised them before, but like I said, I think, yeah, I would defer to Dr. Priestley's judgment as well, because she and I have had lengthy conversations about literacy, and I think come from a similar point of view on it.
Can I offer one other piece of just information? So, I mean, the original resolution, the main goal was to just bring folks together and bring the right people in the room. But there wasn't any specific scoping that, like, we must decide on curriculum or we must have a professional learning plan or anything like that. It was really get the committee together, and that committee could be, the members would be decided on by Dr. Priestley, Chief Robertson, and, there's the, and some of the folks who involved in authoring it, they could decide how big does the committee need to be? How often do they need to meet? All of that was really up to the folks involved. And then they could decide what the scope of the work could be, even, right? Like, and so it's not, none of that is prescribed. We're not committing to any of that. And it would obviously, decisions would have to then go through that body, and then they'd come back to the board. So that we're not like committing to buying curriculum, or the main thing that we would be committing to is deciding to become, to establish some type of working group. And then they could decide how often they meet and how, intense those meetings are, how deep the work is. I think, yeah, so that to me is, I think the one thing that did come up repeatedly though, is folks felt like the language in the resolution itself, some of it was problematic. And so I do think that's an important process of figuring out what language feels respectful and, helpful in framing the work.
Yeah, I think that's, oh, sorry, Commissioner. No, I was going to say that's kind of what I was referring to. I guess what I meant was, I think in terms of the framing around the language was where that was sort of what I was referring to. Because I think it sounds to me like everybody, I haven't heard any opposition to a working group. And so I think just like you said, working out the details of who's on it and then framing the language.
You, commissioners. I think I have some additional questions. I think for me, I'm interested in kind of what we feel the power of the working group will be, because I think working groups typically make recommendations, and I guess some of the language seems like the working group is doing more than that. And I guess I just wanted clarity from the authors as far as kind of how you kind of viewed that, especially when I was looking at the line, the clause where it talks about the ongoing professional development and understanding kind of like the labor implications of trying to kind of navigate that, and just kind of how we felt like that sat between kind of the working group and kind of like the district staff, and kind of how that's navigated kind of in your view. Does that make sense as a question?
I can answer that question if that's okay.
Yeah,
I think
please.
And
for me,
sorry.
it's, oh, sorry.
Oh, not to interrupt, but I think also Brittany oh no, I saw your camera. Okay.
So I do think in any kind of advisory committee that I've kind of participated in designing, it's always really important to have labor kind of roles outlined. So like the assessment, we have an assessment working group, we've had other working groups. And so I think it would be helpful for Dr. Priestley and the authors of the resolution to sit down and figure out, how many, spots on a working group would have representation from both UESF, but also principals came up as a primary, stakeholder, and that we'd also want participation from UASF. And so I think that's addressing the labor related issues, is making sure the right people are in that working group already, so that when people are talking about professional development, there's already kind of representation kind of already embedded in the design.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Commissioner Alexander, do you want to add something?
To your point, I'm just curious. I'm sorry. Was there a staff, like a recommended amendments from staff yet that would address some of these questions? I know there was a presentation and analysis, but I don't think there was specific recommended amendments yet. Was there?
There were no specific recommended amendments, just in the areas that we mentioned, speaking to structured literacy and the working group, the scope of the working group, and some of the language, and then budgetary implications were the areas that we would want to address.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder if it would be helpful, like, because you just raised a really important point, Commissioner Bogus, around that I think our labor team, like, I would love to see specific, like a red line or whatever is most convenient from staff of what would the proposed changes be, and then the authors can decide if they would want to accept them or not. But at least we would have a very, because to move toward a final version.
I'll just say, I know working with Superintendent Matthews, there were staff did have what he did was he went through and then staff went through and they made comments and proposed changes. And then President Lopez and I reviewed those, and then we had dialogue. And then there was a moment where we, because sometimes it's a conversation. It's like, well, do you mean this or that? And so if you wanted to see that, that's actually the process that we went through with the COVID recovery resolution. Staff had a very specific time to say, these are the specific things we would say. And then we could say accept or reject. And then based on that, we could see, well, do we keep it or, so if that makes sense. And at the same time, there's also a need for dialogue at some point, sometimes.
Totally. Yeah. That's what I meant. Like that would happen, and then you all would have a conversation about it, and then we come up with a final proposal.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. So I think my takeaway is that the working group will be working closely with Dr. Priestley and other staff in supporting and kind of advising in her decision-making and kind of the way that she kind of plans and moves things forward with recommendations from community. Yes.
Okay, so I'm not on this committee. I can't make this proposal, but somebody on the committee can. I think what happened last time was somebody can say, you can decide to move it forward without a recommendation or move it forward with a recommendation with the certain stipulations that, that we collaborate and, then it, in partnership, that the next iteration is agreed upon by all involved, something like that, as far as procedurally.
So I think that's what I'm trying to get to, of whether or not we are taking like decision-making power away from central office staff who are making these decisions, or if we are expanding that decision-making to some part of
I'm
the work
saying
group.
as a body, you guys can say, look, as long as, like, I think Commissioner Sanchez had said, I'll support this resolution if you work with the superintendent before you bring it back. And if you both agree on it, then I'm happy to give you a positive recommendation. So it's up to you guys what you want to do. You could say we move this forward with no recommendation, or you could say, as long as you're in agreement with your proposed changes, I'm happy to make a positive recommendation and move it forward to the budget committee. So you guys can make that determination as board members. That's how you want it to move forward.
No, I
With what
understand that.
conditions?
I think what I'm trying to get clarity on is how much power and authority are we giving the working group based off kind of the intentions of the authors, knowing that we're still kind of reworking the language? And is it just making recommendations to the district staff who ultimately make decisions?
Ultimately, me and President Lopez are the authors of the resolution, and we could move it forward without any changes if we wanted to. And staff could say, we don't
I
like
think you're
that.
misunderstanding what I'm asking. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
asking you about when the working group is formed, if this passes, they make recommendations to the
Oh, I
district,
see.
or they determine what we do as far as our curriculum instruction decisions. That's what
I
I'm trying to
think
get
that
clarity
can
on.
be defined by the working group or by the authors of the resolution if they want to specify that. They could say you have a right to tell, but ultimately the board is, I mean, any advisory group is making ultimately like a proposal, and it's up to the board to approve that. And it's also up to the superintendent how things get implemented.
Can I just read one whereas clause from the actual resolution to see if this clears things up? So,
Yes, please.
okay. Okay. So therefore be it resolved, SFUSD shall identify systematic changes. Okay. The literacy working group itself, sorry, I'm reading it from board docs, which is the bullet points are all wonky. Okay. The board shall direct staff to convene a literacy instruction working group, which shall specifically identify strategies for investing funds for core curriculum, training, and screeners that reflect the research consensus that effective beginning reading instruction must include explicit, systematic, core classroom instruction in kindergarten through 5th grade on these essential components: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Identify specific instructional materials to implement the systematic changes in instruction. Consider systemic changes needed to increase literacy outcomes in all demographic groups, including universal screeners and others brought to the committee, and determine which systemic changes will be mandatory. So that is what is currently mandated by the resolution.
I guess I want to say nothing is resolutions don't mandate anything because they're not laws, they're resolves.
Thank you.
Ultimately, we haven't fully implemented a safe and supportive schools resolution, so it's not mandated, but it's a resolve. Like, this is what we want to do, but ultimately that could also change, right? Ultimately, whatever gets brought forward has to meet. Like, if we're saying we're going to agree to work with staff on an amended resolution, that would mean that we would become, authors, the primary authors, the sponsoring commissioners, and staff, being Dr. Priestley, would be comfortable with whatever, however we define that work.
If I could just throw in another point to Commissioner Bogus,
Yes.
What I'm thinking with this resolution is not a space where any advisory committee now has full power and control over the decision making, but really bringing in all of the forces, all of the expertise to a group so that this decision making can happen collaboratively. So I also don't see it where now the advisory group is in full control of anything. They'll collaborate, they'll give suggestions, they'll work together, and as a board, as mentioned, the votes later on will decide how we move forward. But it's not really shifting power from or to any specific group.
No, I really appreciate that clarity. It's just really the focus being on creating more cooperation and transparency and understanding of kind of what's happening and why, so we can kind of work towards greater solutions. Dr. Priestley, I have some additional questions for you. I'm wondering, and I didn't ask you this in advance, so I apologize. Do you know if we have any ongoing costs related to our current curriculum where there's like annual spending on replacement curriculum, additional like materials that we use to support the curriculum in the school sites related to literacy?
So you're asking about our budget in terms of what we allot for?
Yeah, just is there any like ongoing kind of smaller spending than would kind of come with kind of a full purchasing of curriculum that happens annually?
So yes, so we have dollars that come from various places. And so as those dollars become available, we've made decisions. I think you heard in the presentations, we have not been able to provide some materials to all schools. So what we have been working towards is taking those dollars and supplementing and making sure that all of our schools have the materials necessary to implement the reading program, all the materials necessary for tier 2 interventions and things of that nature. So that has been a focus. I don't know if anyone on the team has a specific dollar amount that could support that. I'm going to look to Lisa and Katie if they have a dollar amount. I don't have one off the top of my head, but if they have one, if we don't have one, we'll be sure to get one to you.
Okay, now that's definitely something I think that could wait for another meeting as well if it's something that's not readily available.
And I know we have shared it in a presentation, so it might be that we have that that we can share pretty quick. We can share right now. Katie or Lisa, do we have that available?
So
dollars that we're
I
spending.
just want to jump in, if that's
material.
okay. I don't know how you can define curriculum expenses if the working group doesn't even, like, people have said this isn't about defining curriculum, it's about having a working group. So it's just this is a budget conversation, and I just want to, like, I think that's appropriate if it's defined in this. I think it's just time wise. I think if we're going to amend it and we decide to focus on professional development or something, then it makes sense that then that could be scoped out, like what that potentially could cost, and then that's a budget conversation, and then that would happen in the budget meeting. As far as process goes, I just feel like it's a waste of time to talk about something that might not even end up in the ultimate resolution and isn't actually, the purview of this committee is to talk about curriculum and programs, not budgets. So I know there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, and I don't even know how the resolution is going to change. So having a conversation about budget, it seems a little bit like out of order. If that.
Yeah, let me maybe give more context. I just really lifting up the concerns I heard from the public about the fact that we're spending current dollars on curriculum that isn't effective and isn't backed by science, and just trying to see if that's something that would actually continue because of our need to kind of maintain those as we kind of examine what goes first and kind of what dollar amounts are included in that. So not necessarily the future spending, but the current spend is really,
okay. Like,
yeah.
What are we investing in kind of currently?
Yeah, and what we're going to need to maybe even continue to invest in while we go through this process. I guess I don't want people to think that if we pass this, then we will never spend any more money on the things that they feel like aren't effective, if we actually still have to kind of maintain what we're currently doing as we transition out. And I don't know if you have those numbers now, but no pressure to present them if you do, and we can maybe share them kind of as this comes to the next point for the public. And the
So
board.
give us an opportunity to make sure we have the most up-to-date and current numbers, and we'll make sure the committee has those.
Okay, thank you. Another question that I have that the resolution I don't think is centrally addressing, but I think is in there secondarily, is just around kind of the various approaches to literacy we kind of have at different sites, and just whether or not just kind of we would see we kind of see that as something that is shifting as we kind of go into a new era of direction, both with this resolution and the existing things that you're planning in your department, Dr. Priestley.
Say that one more time for me, Commissioner Bogus. I was being so thoughtful. I just wanted you to know I was jotting down to make sure I had what you were asking so I wouldn't forget. So if you can repeat that question, Ellie.
Yeah, no, if you could just speak a little bit to the various approaches to literacy we see at the different sites, and just how, just kind of whether or not we feel like there's enough being done in this resolution, as well as what the district is already doing to kind of create more consistency across the district.
I'm going to defer to Lisa and Katie on that. They're my experts in terms of the work that is currently happening at sites and some of the work that we're doing to be more consistent in the programming that is offered to students. So Lisa and Katie.
Sure, I'll start. I think one of the things that's pointed out in the resolution is it's imperative that coaching and professional learning accompanies anything. And so teachers' expertise, teachers' understanding their own professional growth is essential to what's happening for students. And that has been an area of focus for us. Of course, that was disrupted during, and continues to be disrupted because of the needs of the pandemic and what that's leading to. But we continue to provide professional learning for our coaches and for our teachers, especially in early literacy, and with our own reflection and analysis of what is working and what's not working, and how to really respond to those gaps that we see, especially those foundational skills that we know are so critical, and we need our teachers and our coaches to really understand those critical parts. I think across the board, as Katie and I and others from our team visit school sites and classrooms, the most challenging thing is implementation. So even when you do purchase new materials, or you want to implement a new type of literacy program or curriculum, the implementation is the hardest lift. And that is why you might see inconsistencies from classroom to classroom or school to school, is really how are the structures at the site supporting teachers' implementation? So is there, grade level collaboration? Is there professional learning at the site level? Like all those structures that are so essential to change at the site level. In terms of what literacy practices do we see at school sites, I think what we see is we see some places where there's really strength in terms of implementing early literacy strategies, but the methodology varies. And it doesn't vary because of what we aren't doing at central office. I think it varies because of the way that teachers feel supported, or if they're really new to the profession. It's just the professional learning and coaching that it takes to support the implementation. It is why it varies. Katie, do you want to add on anything that I might have missed?
No, just that our focus for the last few years has been looking at research-based curriculum and looking at the science, and where there might have been places in our current curriculum where we needed to shore up more emphasis around foundational skills. And learning has been our main focus in all of our professional learning. And we've had, numerous teachers, and that's been our whole focus in the Literacy Coach Network, which serves 35 schools. That's been everything we've been doing the last 2 years, and that includes a lot of additions and really shoring up those materials. So that has been our direction, that has been our focus, and that has been all of our professional learning. And like Lisa said, it is something that we really need to get teachers the professional development, and we don't have structures in place in our district that require that. We don't have structures in place that have every single kindergarten through second grade teacher go through that. We do have a lot who volunteer to come, who are paid to come, who are doing that. And we have our coaches who are doing that at, like I said, at those 35 sites, but that doesn't account for every single site and every single teacher. So I think that whatever happens, we would need to look at our structures that are in place at school sites, both for collaboration amongst teachers and for them to get the professional learning they would need, because like it's been mentioned many times, just like a one-off course or just putting the curriculum in their classrooms doesn't make it happen. So we all recognize that. And so, but that's nowhere in the resolution. So, so that's what we think.
Commissioner Bogus, I just wanted to jump on and go a little further with, and maybe ask Katie or Lisa to share more specifics about, prior to 2018, we didn't have a phonics, spelling, and word study curriculum. We didn't have that. And that was a major gap. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge here in this setting, although it's been stated in the past 2 presentations that ELA team has done, that this has been a gap for many, many, many years. And it has only recently been purchased and begun to be implemented. And as Lisa mentioned, interrupted by the pandemic and continues to be. So maybe Lisa or Katie, could you talk a little bit about the year and what was in place before that and what's in place now in terms of those foundational skills in the phonics, spelling, and word study?
If it's helpful to the commissioners, we can extend that. Yeah, so I think one of the things that comes up a lot, and Doug Rich brought this up, is this idea that it doesn't work to just change parts of the recipe, or to I don't know what the analogy he used, but it was a strong analogy. And I think we agree with that. Like, we really are all working towards the same thing, which is we want better outcomes for our students. And one of the things that happened was when comprehensive approach to literacy was first introduced in our district, it was kind of misinterpreted and misaligned to what our students might need as just reading workshop and writing workshop. And so as we started looking closely at how teachers were implementing literacy, especially early literacy, we saw that there were really some strong components missing. One of those being the phonics and word study. Another component that was missing was taking that phonics and word study and applying it. So that would be in a K2 classroom, that might be looking like shared reading. So how are students actually transferring what they're learning in isolation into context? And so that was a really big gap that we are also trying to look at and achieve. And then, we are reflecting on, well, even with this phonics, spelling, and word study curriculum we purchased, what's missing from it? So what was missing from it is strong routines. What we need to revise is the scope and sequence. The scope and sequence needs to be a lot more, we need to change some pieces around. We also recognize that we need decodable text so students can actually apply the phonics skills they're learning in continuous text. So we're looking at the purchasing of decodables for K1 classrooms. We too are going to different school sites, and those school sites who are trying out, as I mean, SFUSD this is what happens at sites, is like they do try out new things and different things. So we have gone to different sites to look at their practices in implementing different phonics and word study curriculums, and we're learning a lot from those visits. Is that helpful, Susie?
Thank you so much for that. I think just for me, I guess, again, to appreciate the authors of the resolution and all the other commissioners that have really had an eye towards literacy and who have been really active in asking questions and really trying to push us forward, and appreciations to the staff for all the work that you've done to kind of help us to get where we are and helping to get us where we need to be. I think the thing for me is just the numbers. The numbers are just so sad, and just knowing the long-term impacts that those numbers have. And I think like the worst part is knowing that those numbers aren't that different from where they kind of have been. And that our communities in this district, especially our Black folks, have been struggling with not having the adequate supports to really succeed in a lot of these measures and kind of the long-term repercussions that has on people's lives. And so I think for me, just to say that this is such a big priority for me, and I would say I think for all the other commissioners, and that I think this will continue to be a focal point as this resolution moves forwards. And just to say, hopefully we can also find some additional funds in the short term to really just boost the amount of staff and support we have to make sure that everyone is learning how to read and learning how to do math, so they have a strong foundation to be strong students. So again, thank you to everyone, and for spending an hour and a half talking about our urgent literacy issues in the district. And so I would make a recommendation that we move this item forward to budget, to see if there's any budgetary concerns. And so I don't know if there's any secondary recommendations from the authors about how we move forward with this, but I definitely will put that out there. Dr. Priestley, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I would like to, before it goes to budget, I would want to make sure that it's amendments have been made, that we've come to some agreement on the amendments prior to it going to budget.
I don't think you can cost out anything without the amendments. I would agree with that, because the budget staff would have to try and figure out how to calculate costs for something that is going to change. That makes no sense. So I agree 100% with Dr. Priestley.
And so and I guess maybe if legal counsel could offer me advice in this moment, those amendments would have to take place during the next committee meeting.
We can make the amendments, and if we don't make them, then it just doesn't get agendized. I mean, you're basically moving it forward. There's no timeline on when that must happen. You're just saying we're passing it off to this other committee, and then if the budget meeting is next week, it doesn't mean that we all have to make it happen, or if we don't get those amendments done, then it would then be agendized on a future meeting for the budget committee.
So then is that, I guess I'm just trying to get clarity on, so we don't need to make any amendments now for things to move forward. And so I think that's clear. We can just
say we're sending it on with the instruction that it before it comes before the budget committee, that we have an amended resolution that's agreed upon by Dr. Priestley and the authors of the resolution. You could say something like that. And then if Dr. Priestley and me and President Lopez and then the co-author, we're the kind of sponsors of the resolution with co-authors. If President Lopez and if the authors of the resolution and Dr. Priestley, they are to move it forward to the budget committee with an amended version of the resolution that they both agree on, right? We're both kind of presenting it. If she doesn't agree on it, then it won't, or if we don't agree on it, it won't move forward to the budget committee. That's the way that it would go.
Okay, we have a hand. Did you want to go first, President Lopez, or did you want?
I wanted to acknowledge our legal, whose hand was raised.
The old-fashioned hand.
The old-fashioned hand.
Yeah. So I just wanted to give some more options. you can decide if you're not sure exactly what you want the amendments to be, like you don't have line edits, which it sounds like that's the case here. You could also say, you know, here's some concepts that we want to be addressed. Like we want clarifying language on what is the, you know, whether this working group is making recommendations or something else. We want clarity on the composition. We want clarity on the scope. You know, if there's specific buckets where you want to say back to the authors, two of the three members of the curriculum committee are saying, we want the authors to address X, Y, and Z. And if they do, we give it a positive, or we're going to send it back with no recommendation, but we're also recommending that you address A, B, and C. You could do that. If you want to give more guidance, if you feel like you don't want to give specific guidance and you just want to say, we send it back with no recommendation, but we advise that the authors work with staff to address their concerns. It could be as broad as that. Just so kind of the purpose of curriculum is you're giving some guidance back of what you've decided after this meeting, if anything. If you can't decide anything, but we want it to go to budget, then you could say we send it back with no recommendation, except for that, send it back to the full board with no recommendation, other than we think it should go to budget after it's amended. So it's just a matter of how specific the curriculum, two of the three members of curriculum committee want to be on what changes you want to see, if there are, or what conversation you want to happen between the authors and staff. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I guess maybe I would direct it to committee member President Lopez as far as what you would prefer as how we move forward with these. Do we want to make something where we're encouraging the recommendations from included in the presentation, or something broader?
Yes, and I'll try to keep it simple, but I would say with recommendation, as so long as authors work with staff to incorporate recommended amendments in the presentation.
Sorry, with positive recommendation you're saying, or with no recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
With positive.
And is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that. So it's
Okay.
going, you said it goes, and it goes to, it's the positive recommendation with the amendments going to budget, right? Is basically what we said, what you just said.
So is that unanimous?
That is unanimous.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, we will go to our next item, which is an informational item, and I will pass it to Dr. Priestley.
Thank you. Up next, we have Eric Rice and a team of students who will be sharing with us about the vision of the Mission Bay Hub. That is a project they've been working on. It's not a project, it's a, I'm gonna call it a vision for something big, strong, and mighty, Mr. Rice. And so I'm gonna turn it over to them so they can share the work they've been doing over the last several months. And I know the students wanted to be second, but I apologize for our lengthy first conversation because I know they've been waiting. So I appreciate the students hanging on with us so that they could be part of this presentation at this time. Mr. Rice?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Priestley, and good evening, commissioners. And we're super excited to be here. I think you said big, strong, and mighty, or something along that those lines, Dr. Priestley. And that would not be the case if I were sitting with you on my own here, but I'm here with big, strong, and mighty with our students. So we're really excited to share with you about the vision for the hub. Some of you have been part of facilities meetings or budget meetings related to the building itself in Mission Bay. This is really meant to kind of pique your interest and provide some updates about the vision for the hub itself. And you're going to hear more about that from both myself and our students. So I'm Eric Rice, Director of College and Career Readiness, and currently supporting the Thurgood Marshall community as well. And I'd like for my co-hosts, my co-presenters to also introduce themselves. So Claude, William, and Kenita, if you can go on camera if you're not already. I think they're listed as Eric Rice on here because of some technical glitches. But Clad, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Clad or Cladolin. I am a rising senior at Galileo High School.
Hello, my name is William, and I am a junior at Mission High School.
Hi, my name is Kanda. I'm a senior at Thurgood Marshall High School. I am interested in majoring in psychology, and that's one of the reasons why I am the student ambassadors from Mission Bay Hub. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Kanita and William and Clad. And so I will emphasize, I love to say that before we've hired any adults for the Mission Bay Hub, we've hired 11 students. So we have 11 student ambassadors that have been working with us, with a group of adults this past last semester, going into this current semester, on really designing and envisioning what's going to happen in this program. If this program is really meant to be student-centered, then we need students at the center of the design work. So we're excited to showcase that. But I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the basics. So we can go next slide. So again, you may have been part of a lot of the facility conversations, and I'm going to provide a little bit of the gist of this. So the hub is really being designed out as the core part of it, the anchor part of it would be a 1 or 1+ year advanced bridge into those fields of health, biotech, and those other STEM aligned fields that are in Mission Bay. So we're not looking to take any old career pathway, every old sector. It's the sectors that are really thriving in Mission Bay and are really positioned there in a unique way. So working with our partners at UCSF and Kaiser and biotech companies and hospitals and the Warriors and the Chase Center and everyone that's down there. So we're really excited to be integrated into that community. So the idea is that students would not attend the hub full time. They would come as kind of like a semester or a year abroad type of an idea from their home high school. And they would come for half of their day and specialize and have a really exceptional deep learning experience. And I'll show you a sample schedule that we're playing with, but would really be part of us without having to leave their core connection to the campus they've been part of. And it also allows us to allow access and provide access for students from a number of different schools. At the core of this is student agency, and hopefully you see that word loud and clear in that upper right corner of the slide. And this came out in the design work, and it was a really important feature of it. So imagining students doing really deep inquiry and research in those fields, getting training and certification so that when they graduate, they actually have currency to enter into those fields. And we're looking for this to be paid apprenticeships as part of this, that they would really get daily supports and coaching. And I mean that from a real assets place, to really have a group of adults that are already in Mission Bay that can work with our students on their passions, interests, and help fuel those flames and build their capacity. But this would also be for course credits. So this is not an elective experience. And that's for several reasons. One, we think it's a valid demonstration of mastery in these areas to do it in this alternate model. And secondly, we want to make sure there's full access, that the hub is not reserved for students who are in exceptional credit shape, but actually students who may be behind or on track, both can access it as part of their academic day. And that we would work with our partners, both post-secondary and employment partners, to make some explicit bridges. Next slide, please. So in our early design work, we determined 3 major areas that were our major drivers, or you might think of these as design principles. So I won't go into a ton of detail here, but again, top is of the idea of student agency and student-centered learning. So we're looking at a model that really is personalized, still focused within these areas of health, biotech, STEM fields. So there will be structure to it. It's not a complete, free-for-all, but really leveraging, where students with the kind of expertise they're already coming into this with, and a way to really fuel their curiosity. and a structure to support that, not just a philosophy behind it. The idea of the real. So the difference between doing a simulation of something, and we know there's some really important project-based curriculum that is sort of simulation in nature, but the idea is to be right in the middle of it in Mission Bay, to go and not just watch a video about a surgery, but to go sit in on surgery, to have access to the equipment and technology at the hub itself, where maybe they're not actually doing surgery. That might be frowned upon. I don't know what board policy is on that, but we would not have them doing that, but really having hands-on equipment that they can be using, and that are the same kind of equipment you would see in those same professional spaces nearby. And as has been part of our conversation in some of the facilities committees thus far, is to make sure that we have a space and the location that really inspires. So while there is so much opportunity in San Francisco all around, there is a unique value proposition in Mission Bay. So we want to leverage that and to have the truly exceptional facility that our students can have access to on the spot. Next slide, please. These are some of the models that we've used to inspire our program model. So some of you may already be familiar with CART, which is out in Clovis near Fresno. A similar model in terms of students coming from a number of different schools for part of their day. And the program model was also used to help inspire the John O'Connell integrated project-based model. Big picture learning, if you're familiar with like Met West in Oakland or the Met, that's big picture learning. Summit Tech Academy is actually in Missouri, and the campus that the architects for that campus are the same architects that we have up to this point been working on for the whole Mission Bay campus. And they also have some really interesting program models to build on. And then Design Tech is in Redwood City. It's a charter school, but is heavily focused on design thinking. They were built by and with Oracle, and so that represents also a strong public-private partnership. Next slide, please. I think we're getting to the end of my part before we hand off to the real voices here. I really can't emphasize this piece enough around the location. So that star represents, where the school, and as you, I think, are familiar, this is going to be part of the larger campus that will be an elementary school. We'll be up on the 4th floor there. But it is footsteps away from all these amazing resources. And these are just some of the partners that we've been talking to and are getting excited to be part of the work with us. Obviously, UCSF is front and center. They've been with us from very early on and are very, very excited to be partners with us. And they've been providing already so much resource with human capital and partners that are coming into the conversations. The Chase Center was actually hosting us, our team of student ambassadors. We're all going this next week. We're going to be at the Chase Center with partners from UCSF and the Golden State Warriors and Kaiser to do some design work together. So it's just amazing. And so to be able to imagine a curriculum model, really, where students could be on a daily basis walking out of school, imagine that, leaving school, and just going to go, meet with the professional down the street or to go do an observation. And likewise, it's the opposite that is equally important, that the professionals in Mission Bay can on a daily basis walk over to us and be working with students directly in the hub space. Next slide, please. So this is the basic rendering of the overall building. I want to introduce you again to the space itself of the Mission Bay campus. Those first, and the end result may look a little bit different than this, but this is like the concept model that we've worked on with the architects. And this is the hub, and as well as the elementary school and the professional learning space. Conceptualizing 4 floors here. The first 3 would be the elementary school, and then the hub primarily starting to work with high school students, but would be on the same campus. And of course, that leaves lots of exciting opportunities for collaboration with the elementary school. I'm going to turn it over now I'm going to hand off the mic to our student ambassadors who are going to walk you through some of the other concept images that were created by our architects that were in line with what students were looking for. Go ahead, William. Next slide, please.
All right, so for our ideas for the lab would be, we'd have like open labs, and we would have professional like high-tech equipment that like reflects what you see in the actual modern workforce. And we would be having people come in from UCSF or, like working in these hospitals to be coming in and helping out kids in the lab. And yeah. The spaces would be flexible, and they would be open, and you would really feel like you're doing professional work, and they would build up the esteem of the students. And yeah.
Let's go next slide. We're gonna hand off to Clad, right?
For these rooms, these aren't typical classrooms. These rooms or spaces are to involve your learning, and what we want these spaces to be is to be open or outside, green, for example, like living plants to get actual like oxygen and flow into the rooms. Proper sunlight so it can reduce the use of electricity and like save energy, and variety of seating arrangements.
Great. Thanks, Clad and William. So I'm going to sub in real quick here just to give you a sense of the multi-year plan for this. So the facility, as you know, is not scheduled to open, and we know that there are some various variables there, but it's scheduled to open in 25-26 for the overall facility. But we are not waiting till then to start this up. So the plan would be this is an intensive planning and partnership year in 21-22. And we'd be looking to do a soft pilot next year in Mission Bay. So location, location, location. And so we'd be doing an intensive fall semester of planning with a soft pilot. You know, the design for the program is really meant to be a year or a year plus a summer. But we want to hire the initial adult team, the initial teaching team that would be part of the intensive planning with a group of student ambassadors in the fall. Let's start a school off that way, or school program that way, and then be able to recruit for an opening cohort for a 1 semester soft launch where we can really learn from that in the spring of 22-23. So we'd be looking for a January 23 launch of thinking of it as a year 0, while simultaneously building up the program to really open in 23-24. So we're not looking to have the entire year of planning with our initial adult team. We want to actually do some action, bias toward action in the second semester of next year. And then 23-24, we could then expand a bit and offer, some additional offerings. 24-25, a bit more. And then by the time the building opens, we've really got a program that we've learned a ton from, that is well-oiled. And it'll be continuous improvement, but we really want to open that campus with all the bells and whistles and the excitement that students will access. We really want to be in Mission Bay for the next 3 years and deeply embedding there now and providing students access to a different version of it. It won't be the same without the building, but a different version so that we can learn from it right away. Okay, if you want to go next slide. So I'm going to ask our student ambassadors to share more about what they've been involved in over the course of the year. And I think as you listen to realize that what we're asking the student ambassadors to do now is really similar to the kind of role that we're hoping that we would envision the students playing in the hub itself. So go ahead, team.
Yeah, to add on to Eric's point, like we're kind of like the first class at the school, and that's kind of cool to me. So to begin off, like our design process, I remember the first day we built a Lego model of our dream school, and we did a scavenger hunt and went around UCSF and the campuses and checked around the hospitals just to get inspiration. And we reflected on our own experiences in high school, and and we researched other schools, and we just sort of we got a sense of what we would want in a school, and what we'd want future kids to experience in these schools.
Okay, let's hand off to, I think, Kanita, right? Let's go next slide, please.
Hi, so these are the pictures that we took on that day while we spent a couple full days with the experts from UCSF. We're basically talking about a whole year experience in the Mission Bay Hub, and then also what we look for happening in the hub, such as the study environment, supportive teachers, and also the curriculums. We also imagine these technologies, equipments that students can use constantly for their projects, rather than just have a 1 day or 2 day field trip in other places. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Kanita. All right, next slide, please. Thanks. So maybe I'll prompt this one real quick. So building off of Kanita's piece, what the intensive design phase recently has been on, what will curriculum look like? What could it look like? What does a class, quote unquote, look like? Are we going to fall on the same kind of branding and standards that the way we've talked about it in the past, or might this be a very different thing that students are signing up for? What if they focus an entire semester or a year on cancer? What would that look like? What could the experience be? Or on mental health, or on the brain? So each of our ambassadors here have been involved with one of these, and so they're going to share a little bit about their early concept of what they're imagining what could take place at the hub.
So what I am part of, my team is called Cancer Past, Present, and Future. And our main question was, how can we better treat cancer as a community? What our group has been thinking about is getting the community, like patients, family members, and even like the doctors, possibly from Helen Diller. The reason why we say the community is because it's not only the patient who is affected with cancer, it is everyone who is in that person's life.
So my group, we came up with the idea of Brain Spark, and that would be just a study on the brain, and that is an open-ended idea, but there's like so much you can do with that. So we could possibly look at real-life brain surgeries. That's a possibility, and we thought about doing experiments on animals and possibly testing how technology can affect the brain. And we just thought about how students have their original schools that they go to, and you can do surveys with that, and just bring it back to do reports and bring it back to the sort of program, because it's not really a school; it's more like a program that is with your actual school. And so, and the last thing was MRI machines. That would be really cool to just see how a brain is affected by your phone, possibly, and to see how check that out with an MRI machine.
So similar to the one that William have, my team is focused on mental health, because mental health is important to every single one of us. And some people, they might not have the opportunities to really pay attention to their mental. So they might just have like a little discussion with the therapist or just at the wellness center. But this curriculum, we actually have a course for students to learn this in their own self. So we'll have like a introductory experiences at the very first beginning. So we will have like a introduce class, and then we'll have fMRI machine to scan our brain and see what's in our brain. So we get to know more about the result, And then we try to do some activities like yoga or exercising, and or even like eating chocolate for a long period of time, and to see if the results change. And then we'll have like a fMRI test again to see if it changed. After that, we can interview the experts. We'll explore more area, such as finding questions for a projects, like a specific area that students are interested in, and they can focus on their intervention. After that, we can constantly use this scientific way to promote their study and also the project. Um, Afterward, we can share our results to the students at the hub, like the elementary school students and also the middle school students. So that's one of the projects that we can really apply to our real life, to our community that near us around, like Kaiser Permanent, UCSF. We can reach out to them and they can reach out to us. They can come here and help us, support us. So that's what I am really excited for. Thanks.
Thank you, Kanita and Will and Clad. Amazing. So hopefully when you're hearing this, there was, a few slides back, and I'm not asking you to go back, but there was the one about the design principles, about student agency and student-centered learning, about the real, and about a space and location that inspires. So hopefully you actually saw the through line there, those three things, and what the examples that the students just gave. That these ones that they came up with their design group with UCSF, our UCSF partners. Hopefully you can imagine, those images of the labs, the biotech and lab science spaces, and the allied health space with the equipment there, and the area for students to be able to tinker and create new solutions. You can imagine, as students are, thinking about this, this is not a hypothetical exercise. This is something that can be real. So we're really excited to see this come to fruition. Next slide, please. So this is a sample, and I want to emphasize a sample concept of a schedule of what we're thinking about. So we're imagining, students could be part of lab cohort A. So they're going to come every day from say 9 to 11:30. And then they would return to their home school for the afternoon to take the remainder of their classes. Or they might be in lab cohort B, in which case they're primarily there in the afternoons. And then we think about the evening. We want this space being maximized, right? This is really meant to be exceptional space. So maybe that's flexible space for students that want to continue in with some of their work, or we create access points for the community, or we integrate with some of our local after-school program providers to have access to the space, in that area. So there's a lot of different possibilities that we could build on. This could also be flexible. So again, this is just an initial concept of what could play out. And one question that often comes up is around transportation whenever we do this slide. So how are students going to get there? How are they going to get to and from their school? And so our transportation model would be that students would get them, if they're in the morning cohort, they would get themselves to school and under the same standards that they would get themselves to school currently, with additional support as needed to accommodate that. And then we would arrange for transport directly from the hub back to their school after the AM session. We would swoop around, get those PM students, bring them back to the hub, and then those PM students would be getting themselves home. And again, I want to emphasize, with additional accommodations as necessary for students, as is the case with our current schools. Next slide, please. And then this is a concept for credits. So we're imagining, the sort of anchor credits academically being English language arts and a lab science, whether that be biological science or physical science. And or a CTE elective. And so, there's a lot of different factors that may go into, what exactly that would be. Our priority is to provide a truly exceptional, deeper learning experience, and then to have that standards aligned, with those courses. to provide a paid apprenticeship, and we're projecting and hoping to budget for about $2,000 per student for about 120 hours over the course of the year and summer, and to also receive credits in work experience. So again, this is our starter model, and this is why we want to pilot it early, to start with one way of thinking about this, and maybe that gets revised. Maybe we find another subject area, another content area is a really great fit, but we want to start with a few to start. Okay, I think we're at the Q&A, or that concludes our presentation, and we are here, and yeah, thanks for giving us the space.
Thank you for your presentation to all the presenters. And now we'll go to public comment, and we will provide 2 minutes per public commenter.
If you'd like to speak to this item, please raise your hand. And can I also have that translated in Chinese and Spanish?
Si desea hacer comentarios acerca de este tema, por favor, levante la mano. Gracias.
Thank you, Margarita. 大家好，而家係公眾發表意見嘅環節。如果邊位公眾需要發表意見，麻煩你係舉手。多謝你 ，Thank you。
Only see one, Alita Fisher.
Hi, everyone. Putting my CAC hat on, this seems like an amazing opportunity for so many of our kids, particularly a lot of students with IEPs learn differently, and project-based learning has been proven to be an amazing way to engage all kinds of diverse learners. So love this opportunity. As a parent of a high schooler, though, I have a question. I have 2 kids at Mission, for example, and they use block scheduling. So Monday, all 7 periods happen. Tuesday, the first period of the day is first period. Wednesday, the first period of the day is fourth period, right? And so there's a lot of high schools that also have these funky schedules where, you know, if they were expected to be at the hub 9 to 11, you know, that might mean missing a different class every day, right? Or has that type of scheduling been accounted for? Or are we expecting that all of the high schools are going to be realigning their schedules to meet up with this cohort model? Thank you.
Do I respond to those, or okay?
I think if a commissioner asked the question, then you'd be able to respond, but we're not able to respond directly to public comment, I believe.
Thanks for the process check.
That's all the speakers, Commissioner.
Okay. Yeah, President Lopez, you want to get us started?
Sure. Thank you to our student leaders, to Clad, Kanita, and William for being here and for being so thoughtful in this process. I'm very excited to be learning about it. I hope to uplift the current question if that's helpful for you, Alita. And I have just a couple of my own. To begin, I'm just wondering about the capacity and the how many students would be able to participate in this program, and if you all have an idea of the level of interest, since it is thankfully available to all students.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Lopez. So I'll go through I'll respond to the first question that you supported from an earlier comment first. And actually it relates to a couple of the other questions. And I think, one of the pieces we didn't emphasize so much in the formal presentation is the need to have this built out as a relationship with schools. So that this is not just sort of the shiny green flyer that we sort of take around to schools and, with the little ripoff thing at the bottom, sort of the old school, and, tell counselors to maybe, recruit a few students. And it often is the same students that get recruited. Or oftentimes that can happen. And so we want to be careful about that. And we know, and to learn from what happens from other, sometimes centralized models that can happen in districts. So we really want to, and this is also the other reason that we want to pilot it small, because it's not just about I believe we could probably serve, if we had the right space and all those sorts of things, we'd love to serve more students, but we also want to build with intention with school sites. And so we are envisioning, and we have not identified this yet, but identifying, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 high schools in that first cohort that are really part of that relationship. And we start to kind of adapt our model and learn from it based on some of their constraints and scheduling needs. So, and that's the other piece about that, that I was hesitant to put that schedule model up there, but it does provoke that reaction. And so most people in most adult professionals in a non-regimented school environment don't do the exact same thing every single day. They have the same the same order of operations. And so we want to maintain, kind of think outside the box of what that could look like. So in your question, or Ms. Fisher's question, what would it look like to have students, there, because their schedule permits for them to be in the morning 2 days a week, but in the afternoon, the other 2 days of the week. And so that's why it's going to require us to hire a set of teachers that have can be nimble and think flexibly about what student learning can look like if you don't have the exact same students there every single time. Our challenge with that will be, how do you also create a strong sense of community and connection and consistency? But we've heard this early on from students in terms of the model. The word flexibility is really important. So we want to think about the idea of flexibility, of what that can look like. And again, I think that's why we want to start off low. In our opening, you asked about capacity. We're looking to start with 30 students in that spring. And in 25-26, we're looking to be supporting in the core program about 275, 280 students overall during those, the AM, PM. So about the space itself that's being built out on that 4th floor, the projections I received was anywhere between 120 and 140 students at a time. So that's based on the most recent projections. And, there have been some, need to do some value engineering in there, but we're looking at about 120 to 140 students at a time. And so we would project about 280 in a model where it's really one cohort in the morning and one cohort in the afternoon. That does not account for the number of students that we would then want to open it up in, say, in the later afternoon. It doesn't account for summer programming. What if there were, middle school camps going on there being led by our high school students during the summertime, or short-term activities that were more like 1 week, 2 week kinds of, intensives for 9th and 10th graders from a particular class in some of those schools to come into. So we're just beginning to imagine those possibilities, but I think we could see, at the end of the day, well over 500 students being served, or much higher when you start accounting for all those different kinds of structures. The level of interest, we have not done a full piece. If we were to be able to, properly pitch this, and we want to kind of, bake it a little bit longer before it gets fully pitched, which is why we're not going to open it until January of 23. Certainly, if you talk to the 11 student ambassadors, 3 who are officially here and some who might be in the audience, I think you would see what they have voiced is anecdotally who they're talking about are like, when do we get to be part of this? So I think, I don't want to speak for them. And I don't know if Clad or Will or Kanita, if you want to speak at all about what your sense is on what student interest is or would be in something like this.
I can just say anecdotally, like in my school, I get the sense that kids are just waiting for something like new when it comes to science. Like I have a classroom in chemistry that's like 100 years old. I'm not like exaggerating. And so I just think I get the sense that everyone just wants, they want new supplies, and like they feel like the spirit kind of gets killed a little bit when we have such outdated textbooks and supplies. And we just me personally, I would love to be able to do something like this. And I know that my classmates would, and I know that kids in years below will love to do it.
Continuing on what Will said, I completely agree on what he said, because also my school, I go to Galileo, is also 100 years old. What we are being taught is completely different what it's being taught from, obviously from like the 90s, 80s, and 70s, but yet half of it is really outdated. And I just would say adding more new stuff into the curriculum or into school overall would just make school better, I guess.
Kanita, is there anything?
Yeah. So in my opinion, I'm really interested in participating as a student in the Mission Bay Hub because I can learn something new and like in a professional area, like we'll have the teachers that are there to support us, and I can broaden my eyes and have different opinions and insight compared to our own school, and like to have 1 or 2 days that like schedule that is different from our schedule that we have to go to our school like regularly. To have 1 or 2 days off to go to somewhere else is really fresh to me. So that boosts my passion. So I can really to work on that, and especially like completing a project in the STEM field. I think that's really exciting, and at the end, I will feel like a sense of accomplishment. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to add one, just to build on one of the points that was brought, with hearing comments about the space at Mission and the space at Galileo, and like dreaming of spaces that are not. I'm very clear. We actually don't want this to be instead of upgrading those spaces, right? So I'm very sensitive, and I remember this from the facilities discussion, because at one point in the discussion, it was a little bit of like, the funding for the overall Mission Bay project, and some really critical money for other real needs around, across the portfolios. And I know this is not a budget conversation, it's a curricular conversation, but I think part of what I want to emphasize is that we're imagining space that is highly specialized and highly unique that you would not expect to see in any high school classroom. So if you take like the John O'Connell, has this amazing construction lab space, we would not expect every high school to build a construction lab, but rather you have this unique offering at John O'Connell that gives students access to the most current technology. And that's the way we're conceptualizing the space, is to really have access to something truly exceptional and truly specialized that students from multiple campuses can access.
Thank you for that. I have some additional questions. I think my concern is just around like the total number of students that are kind of projected to being served at 500 just seems low to me for kind of the specialness of this resource. And it makes me feel that we might have issues of inequity. I feel like with a lot of our specialty programs, they are able to kind of attract a different kind of clientele or student group than our other schools. It kind of changes the demographics of them. And so I really am interested in how do we create more access for all high school students kind of across the city. And I think really lifting up Hilltop High School, Downtown High School, Ida B. Wells High School, and Civic Center High School, and just how do we find ways to really support those school sites and really have them be a part of whatever pilots that we run to kind of be at the center of it. One thing I'm curious about is how are we thinking about the schedules for English language learners and their ability to kind of access this with the additional kind of requirements and classes that they might have?
Commissioner Bogus, thank you for your questions. And duly noted, we do have a, we do want to make sure that the relationship with schools piece And this is, I want to make sure this is heard. This is not about, schools on the west side not accessing this or not being allowed to access it, but the relationships that we'll be building as sort of that core piece will begin in the Southeast and will be anchored in the Southeast by design. So I want to make sure that's loud and clear, including the schools. And I, those principals, if they're listening to this, they're like, wait, what do you do? So we haven't gotten to that stage yet of explicitly laying that out, but that is a real high priority for us. And in terms of the schedules, Fiona, I'll need to get back to you about the more specifics on that. But I think what I will say is that the delivery model is meant to have a versatility in that to be able to accommodate a variety of different needs. And I think we sometimes think about that as what class they're taking, starting with that, and then what experience they can have based on what's on their schedule. And I would say part of what we're trying to do here is really design out the experience that we know is good for English learners, good for students who have various learning needs or learning differences, to accommodate a variety of student passions and interests into the delivery model and validate that as part of a credit accrual. And in fact, I would say the fact that we would be offering English language arts as part of that will be, I know that's part of what has been challenging for many ELL students is meeting all their ELA requirements and their ELL. But we know that, if I'm learning a new language, immersion, we know that the power of immersion in our districts, my own boys have experienced it in Spanish. And so we've seen students from SF International who are doing internships in the field, and the tremendous growth in their confidence and capacity in the English language. And so we know that the experience can support it. And then we just, in a technical place, we want to make sure the credits match up with that.
No, I appreciate that. I guess I just have a few other things I would just like to highlight for y'all's consideration. Really thinking about transportation for students and how are we helping to make sure students have easy time accessing it, even if it is kind of focused on the Southeast, it just still could be difficult to get from different points. I'm in the Southeast of the city to Mission Bay. I would also just love to see there being a pipeline to employment connected to this in some way. I think that would be awesome. I'd love to see students getting college credit for participating in this and that kind of being a focal part of it. I would love to figure out a way to ensure that low performing students are still able to kind of access the things that are happening in the hub as a way to pull them deeper into school. And I'd love to figure out a way to have a connection to athletics and performing arts programs and students who might not be naturally inclined to want to engage in this type of stuff, but who'd be really excited for the opportunity if it kind of came before them. So I think those are just kind of additional things I will throw at you all and appreciate all the hard work you're doing. And we'll go to Commissioner Collins.
Thank you. I just had a few thoughts to add and appreciate all the comments that have been made and really appreciate all the work that folks are doing. I guess I'm a little confused about building a structure that isn't totally defined. I feel like you have a purpose and I feel like I want to know what is the purpose of the building, and then the design should follow from that, as opposed to having a flexible space and then figuring out what kind of goes in there. And I know you have some ideas, but it's not really clear to me. And I think, if you have a performing arts program and you need theaters to support that, or if you have an auto, engineering program, then you're going to have a totally different space. And so I personally also am concerned as well about it's going to cost a lot of money, and this isn't a budget conversation, but when you're building something in San Francisco to put that large of an investment into physical space, we want to maximize that investment by how many students are able to utilize it. And I would personally, I think the model of kind of kids moving in and out doesn't make sense to me personally. And maybe I need to be more flexible and, understand more kind of what your vision is, but schools are communities. and students need support. And it feels like kids pick schools that have, culture. Like Mission High School has a culture and a vibe, and O'Connell does, and Lowell does, and Ruthersawa does, right? And students pick those schools because of that culture and that energy, and also from the academics that they offer. And I feel like, wouldn't it be wonderful to really create you're building a school community, not just, and the building needs to hold that physical space needs to hold that. But I don't, thinking of kids as moving in and out, just for me as as a former high school teacher, like I think it would be wonderful. And I don't know if this is something that you're open to, but to really think about what are students interested in, and what's the match connection between what they're interested in and what are these industries in San Francisco that are experiencing growth. And if we're there's a lot of gentrification happening, and there's a lot of San Francisco born young people that can't afford to live here. And if we could create a high school that allows them a pathway to employment in our own city, in some of the sectors that are really experiencing growth and prosperity, I think that is exciting. And I did hear that. And if we can find a way to kind of design programs that kind of connect both student interest in future opportunities and current, opportunities that are here, so that we can have Black and brown students staying in the city and with, they can live and work after they graduate. I think that's exciting. And I think that also gets me thinking, like, who is this building for? What's the demographic of students, right? And so we want to make sure, as Commissioner Bogus said, like, equity it should be at the heart of our work. If we designed a school and our primary focus, like we have some schools like international, like schools that are focused on meeting the needs of immigrant students, schools that are focused around trades. Like, I think there's some really exciting opportunities where we could design a high school, with a demographic that really isn't being served, but open to all students. And I like the idea of kids having choices. And with all of our high schools being lottery based, being able to say, here's another option, and focus resources on a demographic group that has been under-resourced and underserved. Those are just open thoughts that I have. And like I said, I'm very open, but this is, this came up with the 135 Van Ness project. I think there's a lot of exciting ideas about having an arts hub, and yet it's also really hard to justify investing, 300 or potentially $400 million at this point, on a space that doesn't serve, like, you really have to be thoughtful about how that's offering something that is, and I do think we can have one high school that serves, that provides something that, like, doesn't exist anywhere, and just like we have School of the Arts and we have Lowell, that has a lot of AP classes and a lot of language classes. Like, I think we can offer things at different high schools as long as they're open to all students. So anyway, those are some initial thoughts, and I'm definitely interested in the idea, though, of creating partnerships and avenues for our students that are born and raised here, and specifically Black and brown and low income students, having educational opportunities that, like, support them in career success and post-secondary success, and allow them to live and thrive in our city.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, and I think that will end our discussion on this item. Thank you so much to all the presenters, and we'll go to our final information item.
Thank you, Commissioner Bogus. Thank you, Eric Rice, and students, for your participation and your patience tonight. I'm so glad to have you present on such an exciting venture. And so we hope to have you back for more at a later time. Yes, we have one more presentation for the evening, and we have three presenters, Dr. Ritu Khanna, Cynthia Ladson, and Michelle Jacques-Menegas. They will be giving us an update on the assessment committee's work over the past year. And I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Khanna.
Thank you, Dr. Priestley. Good evening, commissioners, colleagues, and the community, my public. My name is Ritu Khanna from Research Planning and Assessment. It is my pleasure to do this presentation with my colleagues. Cynthia Lasden from UESF, representing UESF, and Michelle Jack Manages from the Parent Advisory Council. We are pleased to share this update on behalf of the UESF, SFUSD, Family Assessment Committee. So these were the three parties or stakeholder groups that were within this committee, as a brief overview and summary of our work together. I also want to extend a special thanks to Jess Rios for all his work in coordinating and facilitating this committee for the last 3 years and keeping us on track. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is giving you a slide on the different groups that have been represented in this committee. So this is the committee composition. The work of this committee was based on the board resolution on SFUSD assessments, which was slated in December 2017. The resolution outlined that a committee composed of representatives from the district, UESF, and families explore district assessments and make recommendations to the school board prior to the close of the 2017-18 school year. Since then, the committee has continued to meet and work together, as I'll describe in the next slide. But just on this slide, you will see the range of the stakeholder groups on the right side of the slide. The steering committee does represent Cynthia, who's right here presenting with us, and Michelle, who represents the families. And myself were the steering committee members from the district. So we met and we collaboratively shaped the direction and the scope of the assessment committee's engagement. And then we had monthly meetings of all members of the assessment steering committee. Next slide, please. This slide actually recaps the scope of the assessment committee activities from Jan 2018 to Feb 2020, which was pre-pandemic. So I'm going to begin with the first time we met, which was in January 2018, and we met till May 2018. We held 4 committee meetings in which we reviewed the K-8 assessments. That was our focus. Within that focus, we reviewed Fontes and Pinnell and the math district assessment. And we developed recommendations for the board meeting. As per the resolution at the May 8, 2018 regular board meeting, we presented our work and recommendations for both the Fontes and Pinnell and the math benchmark. The board approved and moved forward the recommendations, which were then acted on. New family documents on these assessments were created. Additional subtime was provided for the administration of FNP, and the math milestone tasks replaced the existing formative assessment in math. At the Feb 11th, 2019 Curriculum and Program Committee meeting, we shared an update regarding the progress on the recommendations that were made and that were made in the May 8th, 2018 meeting. We met again from December 2019 to Feb 2020, and then the pandemic did stop our meetings. We had held 2 committee meetings last year in which we reviewed, or the year pre-pandemic, in which we reviewed a language pathways assessment proposal. And we confirmed that our common topic of interest should be analysis to action. However, the remaining meetings for that school year were canceled due to COVID-19 school closures. We picked up on the topic of analysis to action. And in the next 2 slides, you will see the work that we did virtually, again, in the steering committee meetings during 2021 towards analysis to action. I will now turn it over to Cynthia, who will share the next couple of slides. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Good evening, commissioners, panelists, Dr. Priestley, and if we have any remaining members of the public still here, thank you for hanging on. I'm Cynthia Lasden, as Rito mentioned. I'm the chair for the UESF contingent on the Joint Assessment Committee. I'm currently a literacy coach at McKinley Elementary School, and I will be presenting the next couple of slides discussing our work last year during distance learning. I'd actually like for us to start on slide 5. So if we could advance one more slide, and then we're going to come back to this one. I think sort of to set the context, this would be a bit better. So last year we were in the context of distance learning. And as Ritu said, we decided to pick up the thread of analysis to action, which we had identified the year prior, but we couldn't really get much done on. Analysis to action, this means going beyond doing an assessment and collecting data, but really using that data in a meaningful way. So frequently we have assessments, state, district, in our classroom. Once they're done, we don't look at them. They may be a standalone or not really useful to inform teaching and next steps. And we really wanted to look at what are teachers doing during distance learning that we could also look at that would translate as well as when they're back in the classroom. So we looked at some assessments to look at how educators were analyzing what their students were doing, what their students were understanding and misunderstanding, and then how they were using that information to plan instruction, to involve students in goal setting, and also to communicate with families. So on this slide in front of you, you have standard 5 of the California Standards for the Teaching Profession, which is really all about assessment. And we focused on the ones you can see with the blue like parentheses there on the side. So we really looked at standard 5.3, which is about monitoring learning. So an assessment should monitor student learning. 5.4, which was to establish learning goals and planning differentiated and modifying instruction. 5.6, which is using technology, which we surely did a lot of that last year, and we continue to this year. And 5.7, sharing this information in a timely way with students and also with families. You can see the graphic circle on the left is, when we do a cycle of assessment, we have goals that are set, we collect data, and then we really focused on that, again, that analysis where we reflected on the data and then did something with it, did something meaningful with it in the classroom for teaching and learning. Okay, so now I'll go back to slide 4, please, advancing. So we did this over 4 meetings last year, as Ritu explained. It was a really hectic year for those of us, I mean, for all of us, but for those of you in the classroom, we had a hard time getting folks to come to and present information. I'm an out of the classroom teacher. I'm a literacy coach currently, and we normally have 6 UASF members, 6 families members, and 6 classroom educators and paraprofessionals occasionally. And last year we really had like me and one other reading specialist, I believe, Gina Schur, and then there were, we had up to 4, but we definitely never had 6. And so we were really getting creative with how we found teachers who were doing assessments and how we presented that information. And again, we wanted to look at things that were meaningful during distance learning, but that also could be applied in person when we came back, because we didn't want last year just to be a standalone year of what we did. So we spent 1 meeting on each, looking at math, looking at reading, and looking at writing, over 3 meetings. And then our last meeting, which Michelle will speak about, was more about the recommendations. So in December, which was our first meeting with the full committee, we looked at a reading video that highlighted a 3rd grade teacher. She was explaining how she took a classroom set of F&P reading data, which is our district assessment that we do for reading, and looking beyond the letter level. So a lot of times we just get it for the letter and we stick it in Illuminate, and that's where we end. But really what taking the analysis into action, this teacher showed how she looked at the different behaviors that the students were understanding and not understanding. So she, moving beyond the letters, she was able to look at like who needed practice in decoding, who needed practice in fluency or comprehension. And so she showed how she grouped students together, and she was able to make the next thoughtful lesson plans for different groups of students, and then to follow up on those in her virtual classroom. And for the math and the writing piece, we did some similar things. So the math was the next one in January. And we had the principal from John Muir, who's Sarah Liebert, and math guru Marilyn Burns, who works with her site. And I'm not sure if she works with other sites as well. They presented a system of doing math interviews to collect student data. And they showed some videos of our SFUSD youth engaging with teachers who are asking questions around math that really highlighted both their understandings and their misunderstandings. And then how teachers were able to adapt lessons based on those learnings. And then lastly, in March, we looked at a class set of writing samples. That was a performance assessment that's really similar. If you're familiar with the integrated writing assessment, it's really similar to that. And so it has like a way that you can calibrate it. You look at rubrics and you look at student strengths and needs. And again, that teacher, we looked at how that teacher was able to make small groups, involve her students in writing goals, and then also use that information to communicate with parents for conferences and or on report cards. So we tried to look at authentic assessments and then what teachers were actually doing during distance learning, and also that they're doing that we can use back in in-person learning. Our final meeting, my colleague Michelle Jacques-Menegaz will talk about the reflections that we had. So I'll pass it on to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next slide, please. So just to, sorry, one more. Thank you. So again, I'm Michelle Jacques-Menegaz. I'm the coordinator for the Parent Advisory Council to the SF Board of Ed. And my role on the steering committee is to really to partner with Cynthia, with Ritu, and to really to ensure that we have representatives from the various family advisory groups present on the committee so that we can reflect a wide range of parent voice and perspective in the work. And so first, I'll tell you a little bit about the process that we used in each of our meetings and sort of throughout the course of the year that you've heard referenced already, which is this analysis to action piece, right? And so for each meeting, and you again see a recap of the 3 core content meetings that we held on the right there, reading, math, and writing. And for each of those, we had a presentation. I should say, actually, we started with like a little update or recap, right, from work that was done in the previous year for the first meeting, and then the previous meeting going after that. And then we would have a presentation like Cynthia mentioned, where we would focus on the work itself. And then we would go into breakout groups and look at what themes came up, what wonders did we have, suggestions, as well as what structures and resources would need to be in place in order to support the work. So we looked at where it was happening, what were those structures and resources, and then what would that also mean like on a larger scale across the district if we're to make sure that that happens consistently across sites. And then we brought those back and did a whole group share out. And then like you see, we were always making sure to bring a little recap back so that we could kind of pick up the pieces and it wasn't just, we talked about that once and it was left behind. Next slide, please. And so when we did our debrief at our final meeting last year, we really looked at what themes had come up in each of the previous meetings over the course of the year. And so one of the top ones, I think, was just really, it was both a wonder and sort of a system and structure that's needed, right, to keep the work going, which is what resources and time on professional development calendars need to be in place at school sites. So what are those school-based structures to support the ongoing literacy and math data analysis, reflection, and of course, action, right? Are there instructional leadership teams? Is there release time? What's the professional development opportunities? That sort of thing. And then another was an emphasis on making sure that that information is shared out with families so that families know how to support their students. So whether it's once a semester or trimester, whatever it might be, that when we're doing those report outs, whether it's portfolio presentations or for some of our younger students, it might just be a straight up kind of sit down with the teacher over a report card, that the emphasis is on those assessments, right? That there's data, that there's artifacts from learning that can be shared with families, so that the focus is on where that student is at in demonstrating their academic behaviors and tools rather than what grade they're getting. And then also sharing, like, what are these best practices? How do we know that they're best practices, that they're working? And then how can we create a system of exchange so that those ideas and those practices can be shared and that educators can be supported in implementing them by their peers and others. And that it's also accessible to whomever it might pertain to. Maybe there's families that have the capacity and interest in just learning more about it, for example. But that always is emphasis that you see on analysis, reflection, and action on data. And then finally, leveraging and refining what resources currently exist, as well as tools to build a common language around analyzing data and determining what actions should be taken. Always with this emphasis on anti-racist assessment practices. And we know there's a lot of talk and a lot of communication about that, but how do we make sure that we're all saying the same thing and that what we're saying means the same thing? So that we have a consistent, like I say, consistent language and resources and tools to be able to implement stuff, because we know that that's a key to making this really effective on a district-wide level. Next slide, please. And finally, just in sort of looking at the year and what came out of it all, some really key reflections came out, which is that this committee structure and the range of stakeholder involvement is really invaluable. It creates rich discussions and information exchange, with the caveat that you heard Cynthia talk about, which is that last year especially was extra hard for our educators to just even imagine having the space and the bandwidth to be able to participate. So that was a concern for us, because while we love, on my level, I love how much parent involvement was able to be there. It's not balanced if we don't have our educators in the space too. And so, you know, one thing we're wondering is how can we make that work better for our teachers? How can we create that space that makes it possible for them to join us? And that by centering on this analysis to action theme, we focused our discourse on the relevance and use of assessments. So like, why are we assessing, right? What are we going to do with that information? And what's the point of it? Because if we don't know that, then it's pointless. And then some ideas for next steps, including focusing on, or continuing to focus our on assessment for learning, rather than sort of this idea that luckily is a little outdated, which is like to learn to do well on a test. Instead, we want to figure out what kinds of assessments really tell us how our kids are learning and what they need. And that is research-based and practice-based, and that we have good strategies that will engage our students, our educators, and our families. And then, you know, some folks have been wondering sort of like, well, what's happening with the assessment committee and where are we going next? And it's just, I think, as everyone can imagine, with all the ups and downs and this challenge we talked about previously around engaging our educators, we thought, okay, well, how can we take what we've already learned in the past year plus and kind of move forward with that, rather than trying to ask a lot more of folks at the moment. So that's our presentation, and we look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll see if there's any public comment, and we will give 1 minute for any public comment.
If you'd like to speak to this item, please raise your hand, and I would like to have that translated in Chinese and Spanish, please.
Si desea hacer un comentario acerca de este tema, por favor, levante su mano. Muchas gracias. Go ahead, Eunice.
Thank you, Margarita. 大家好，而家係公眾發表意見嘅環節。如果你需要發表意見，麻煩你舉手。多謝你。Thank you.
Scene 2, Commissioner. Rebecca?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Fedorko. I am a special ed teacher. So like my whole job is progress monitoring and data collection. I think for every single student that I work with, every session, I collect 2 to 3 pieces of data per session. And so I'm hoping that there's special educator voices in the assessment committee, just because I think so much of what we do revolves around that. I am disappointed to not hear any discussion of like universal screeners, especially when we talk about anti-racism. I think a study out of Texas showed that 80% of Texas inmates were functionally illiterate and that 48% had dyslexia. And it's such a crisis that Congress passed the First Step Act in 2018, requiring all federal inmates to be screened for dyslexia. And it's the Department of Justice suggested to the Department of Education that maybe we should do the same. We currently don't. So I would really love to see a discussion around that, because the F&P assessment is not accurate when it comes to finding students with dyslexia or reading disabilities.
I'm sorry, Megan? Megan?
Hello, this is Megan Potente. I was a member of the committee last year representing the CAC for special education. And I just want to build on what the caller Rebecca said and just bring to your attention the fact that the San Francisco City and County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to support Senate Bill 237, which will require the State Board of Ed to convene a list of approved screeners for risk of dyslexia. So people are aware of becoming more aware of assessment. And as Rebecca said, the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment does not serve as a standardized screener. So just, continue the conversation, and thank you all for the opportunity to bring together so many people to discuss this very important topic. Thank you.
Hava?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk as a parent and say something similar. I noticed that there wasn't a focus on the actual assessments if they need to be reevaluated. Everything else is very promising. I do want to say 2 things. My son is in general ed as well as special ed. And when he is assessed along special ed lines, that assesses for his deficits. When I get report cards and go to parent teacher conference, it is F&P. It is night and day. It is not informative to his actual deficits. It cannot tell me exactly. You mentioned that it might be able to analyze decoding. I have never had that conversation. I have learned that my son is on letter P and he's meeting expectations while simultaneously he is not meeting expectations. And that is the problem. He cannot spell properly, to the point when they told him to type, please let me finish this, it's important, because he has difficulty with writing. He was terrified because he can't figure out how to spell a simple word like boat or frog, so he won't even try. Please, the assessment needs to be reevaluated so we can get accurate information as to what's going on with our kids, as well as educators can be informed and help our kids at the same time. Thank you so much for your work.
That's it, Commissioner.
Thank you. And that will end public comment. Is there any comment from commissioners? Commissioner Collins?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I don't think I was on the board. I think I was, but I remember when the decision to move, I think might have been working, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I think I might have been working in the assessment office, but I just remember the rationale behind it. And I think it's important. The reason that we convened the assessment committee was because there was questions and concerns around benchmark assessments. And there's a lot of assessments when you put them all together, the idea was to focus on ones that, you know, to really have a focus. And I guess that's my question for staff is, at the time, you know, the district had implemented Fontes and Pinnell, and teachers were raising concern about just it being difficult to do. And then there were also concerns around, you know, math assessments. And so I'm just interested in knowing, I mean, we're in a very different place right now. At that time, we were just new to implementing Common Core curriculum, and we were doing a lot of different types. I mean, we've had learning and schooling disrupted, and kids are in a different place. And so I'm just wondering, Chief Khanna, if you can tell me, you know, we have a lot of assessments and we should be doing, you know, we assess a lot of things, but as far as the committee goes, where do you see a potential opportunity for exploration and discussion with this kind of a committee that both involves central office, site staff, and families?
Thank you, Dr. Commissioner Collins, for your question. I would definitely say that the first thing is that there need to be multiple measures of knowing or evidence of learning. So that's the very first thing. So within this multiple measures, you know, we cannot just say this is the only assessment that will tell us the answer. It has to be multiple ways of knowing what is happening. And so that's the number one thing. Two is I would definitely also reference the structures and the time and the opportunities that teachers have in terms of being able to analyze, reflect, and act on, right? So second is the time component. Third is the knowledge component. I might have analyzed my results and know what exactly the problem is, but then do I have the strategies and the capacity to then answer and act? So it's building the support, the professional development, and the capacity around the action.
So I guess my question is, what questions do you think, if you're focused on answering a question using assessment in a really comprehensive and thoughtful way, do you have any thoughts on what topics or questions that this assessment committee could potentially answer going forward as a to focus the work?
I'm not into analyzing the content of the assessments. I feel that you know, the content is elsewhere. What this committee has, with the power of having teachers and families and district folks, is assessing the 5 essentials to making the use of data true. And those 5 essentials is what I'm telling you, which is using multiple measures, having structures in place, encouraging the professional development. So those are things that I would definitely want to, you know, focus around versus saying, let's focus on a assessment.
Okay, thanks.
I have a few questions. I first was wondering if someone could address the issue around universal screening and kind of whether or not that's something that has kind of been brought up to this committee, and kind of what the outcomes of kind of those conversations or deliberations have been. I don't know who's best to answer, but please feel free to unmute yourself if you feel like you are.
I'll go ahead and take a try, but then I'll definitely defer to my partners. Yes, I think universal screening was brought up once, but then it was also resolved as it has another research practice partnership where it is being discussed in more detail, where we have partnered with professors from Stanford who are addressing the same concern. So I think it had a whole different venue where it was being discussed. But again, I'll let Michelle and Cynthia answer that too.
I actually have nothing to add to that. Sorry. Aside from the fact that we're hearing parents that are concerned about it.
Yeah. It's not like we have not discussed this, but the scope of the committee, what we presented to you right now was a tiny sliver of what we did. Like we presented to you the three content meetings where we reviewed what teachers online were doing for the vast majority of their classes in 3 content areas. So it's not like we're not talking about other things. So that's the first thing I just wanted to address. The second thing is the scope of this committee, as I understand it, and again, I'm a teacher, I'm a UESF rep, and we don't have the power to say, and I kind of wish we did on this committee, but we don't have the power to say we're doing this assessment and we want to get rid of that one. Like I would love to be able to have that conversation on this committee, and I've been asking for that. So this is not like I'm hijacking anything, but like the scope of the committee has been to review. And if we look at the board reso, what it was reviewing what we have in place, and then like any new assessment that comes out is supposed to come before the committee, but like this committee doesn't decide what assessments are done and what's not done.
I just sorry to interrupt.
Just to clarify that, yeah.
No, I appreciate it. I guess I would just say I appreciate that clarity. When I read the resolution and the title of it being to further reduce assessments in SFUSD, it does feel to me that the committee should be making recommendations to reduce the number that we have. And so I think I'm concerned about the focus of the committee and kind of how we kind of have got into a place that feels very different from what is in the text of the resolution, which talks about universal screening, but that actually maybe has a better place. So I guess I also don't see the word like reducing assessments within the presentation, which is the focal point and the name of the resolution. So I think for me, it concerns me. Also, I think it seems like it's been a relatively slow process, which makes me really worry that maybe it's not effective at what we're trying to do, and we maybe need to reconsider it. And so I mean, I guess I'm interested maybe if we could have this come back and have maybe a more in-depth conversation about kind of the superintendent's approach and strategy around the committee and kind of how we got to the place we're at now, as well as sharing numbers around the number of reductions we've had in assessments, and if there is an end date that we kind of have set for this assessment committee, or is it actually a long-standing committee, which I think we actually would want to actually kind of staff and support differently, and maybe even find a way to compensate the families and parents who are going to be kind of involved in it moving forward. And so I guess I don't need those questions answered now, but I would love for this to come back so we could have more of an in-depth conversation and really kind of figure out the best way forward. Because I really would want to support this committee to really act with urgency to be able to make recommendations that we can act on, or I'd like to end the committee and create something new that can allow us to do that. So I guess just to throw that out there, and I don't know if any of the committee members want to respond to that, or any of the board members, but I definitely want to create some space for that. Okay, people know that it is 7 o'clock, so we do not need to have a lot of dialogue or discussion. And so I think with that, we will adjourn our meeting for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.